All right, let's get it. Drive time. Tuesday afternoon. We are looking at about 14 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. We're a little late today. We had some fun crosstalk with Sean on this Tuesday afternoon, but as it is, every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. That's Porter Larson behind the glass today. Happy Tuesday to you. Beautiful day outside, and as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Jam-packed show, NBA playoffs, inching closer and closer to May the 12th, which is the next date that will be interesting for the Utah Jazz and Jazz fans. The Jazz, once again, for the third straight year, not participating in the spring tournament known as the NBA playoffs. So some fun games last night. We have 4 games tonight. Well, tonight/this afternoon, there's going to be one game that actually gets going while we're on air and may even be at like halftime by the time that we finish. So 4 o'clock today on NBA TV, the Indiana Pacers are going to try to eliminate the Milwaukee Bucks. A lot of people wondering if this is the final game Giannis Antetokounmpo will be playing for Milwaukee. Indiana has been very impressive. And should they advance, they're going to take on Donovan Mitchell and the Cleveland Cavaliers, who dog-walked the Miami Heat last night. They were up by 60 at one point and ended up winning by, I believe, 55. It is the largest single series plus-minus in the history of the NBA playoffs. The Cavs just ran away from Miami. Of course, Miami winning the play-in style tournament to get in as the 8th seed. And their reward was just to get smoked by the Cleveland Cavaliers. Donovan's been really good. You know, we'll talk about this on the show today. We're not really used to, as Jazz fans here in Salt Lake City, we're not really used to seeing players that played here and played really well here go on to find extreme success in other places. This kid is going to be the exception. Donovan's going to be the exception. For all the conversation about the calculated risk, and I'm being kind to Nico Harrison, that the Dallas Mavericks took by trading a 25-year-old generational superstar Luka Doncic, the Jazz did the same thing. The Jazz did the same thing in trading away Donovan Mitchell as he was kind of approaching his prime. And now Jazz fans watching this Cleveland Cavaliers team and seeing what Donovan is able to do as he continues to grow. And then last night, man, great television with the Warriors and the Rockets, just gripping TV. Saw Golden State hang on at the end, 109-106. Jimmy Butler did play after all the conversation about whether or not he was going to go. And he had 14 points in the fourth quarter, hit all 12 of his free throws. Houston, as a team, missed 12 free throws as a group. They were 19 of 31. Draymond Green with a great defensive stand there at the end. And Jimmy Butler with a grown-up, grown-ass man, game-winning rebound to seal the deal for Golden State. So move over to the action tonight. Like I said, there's going to be a really early tip, 4 o'clock on NBA TV is the Bucks and the Pacers. Also on NBA TV will be the Magic and the Celtics. Boston trying to just eliminate Orlando. They're up 3-1. Not sure if Drew Holiday is going to play. Not sure if it even matters. Orlando's been pesky, but Boston, I still think the best team in the East, although Cleveland will have something to say about it. And then the Pistons and the Knicks return to the world's most famous arena and the Mecca of basketball in the heart of New York City, Madison Square Garden, where the Knicks will try to advance to the second round as they lead Detroit 3-1. That's been a fun series as well. And then a lot of intrigue for the late-night game. It's 8 o'clock on Turner, and TNT also has the Pistons and the Knicks. So it will be Clippers-Nuggets at 8 o'clock Mountain Time from Ball Arena in Denver, Colorado. That series is tied at 2, and that's been a really cool series, fun series to watch as well. So NBA playoff action on the program today. We'll kind of bring it around to talk a little Utah Jazz through the prism of what we can learn from some of these teams that have been rebuilding, and now we're actually playing games that matter. Get into some of that on the show. Alex Jensen and the Utah men's basketball staff added a piece yesterday, and don't know much about him, but watching some highlights over the past 24 hours, he's a really dynamic ball-in-hand playmaking guard, which is exactly what Utah basketball did not have last year. College football transfer portal is closed, but we'll get to the latest in the college football world storylines and NFL draft, which only saw 2 local players drafted. One Ute, Caleb Lohner, goes to the Denver Broncos, and Jalen Royals from Utah State drafted. No BYU players drafted this year, but we will get to the latest in the world of college football. And if you care about such things, House versus NCAA, all of the legislation we're waiting to hear passed. to kind of understand what sort of guardrails and guidelines will be in place. So we'll get some of that stuff on the show as well. RSL continues their road-heavy April/May schedule as we are about to turn our calendars to May coming up. They're going to be in Vancouver coming up on Saturday after getting all 3 points in San Diego. So a little soccer on the program as well. Lot to do, Tuesday afternoon style of this little old radio program. We appreciate your ears. We'll start things off with Kyle Bonagura, who covers college football and also soccer for ESPN. NBA Daily Assist style with Tim McMahon on the show today. Kalen Jones, our old friend, who's been with Sports Illustrated and The Ringer. He's now with Netflix. Netflix has a couple of really exciting sports docs coming up. One on Brett Favre, as the trailer was just released today. So we'll bring in our old buddy Kalen Jones. And then Sam Bruckhaus, who covers the NFL for our friends at Sumer Sports, for some NFL draft takeaways on the program as well. So a lot to do. Kyle Bonagura, Tim McMahon, Kalen Jones, Sam Bruckhaus, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, happy Tuesday, beautiful day. And that guy, Porter Larson, producing the program. I don't know, man. I'm not sure where you're at with this Warriors-Rockets series, but, Golden State's probably going to win it, but this has been gripping television. Last night was a lot of fun.
We talked about it before the weekend. It was probably the series that, from like a clashing styles standpoint, was the one we were most looking forward to. The one that was, most interesting. Because you have this changing of the guard that's happening in the NBA. It doesn't happen overnight. It never does. It's not how it works. But there is a little bit of a changing of the guard, and you see it in this series. It's Steph, it's Jimmy Butler, it's Draymond Green. And yes, I do think they're going to win the series. But although it's 3-1, it hasn't been, it's been closer than 3-1. All the games have been competitive. The back and forths have been fun. I just don't think the Rockets have quite enough experience for the late game situations in that series. We saw that last night. But yeah, man, it's been probably the most entertaining series to watch from a standpoint both of clashing styles of basketball and kind of generations clashing as well.
No doubt. It's been a lot of fun. So I say it all the time, spring basketball reminds all of us basketball fans what this great game can look like when the best players in the world actually care about, doing their job and showing up and playing ball. So Kyle Bonagura, our first guest right out of the gates. We'll do some college football and squeeze in a little soccer if time allows with Kyle. But on a Tuesday afternoon, before we get to Kyle, courtesy of our good friends at Prize Picks, it is time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN 700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
You can cash in on the basketball playoffs with Prize Picks. Don't miss your chance to add your favorite players from the court to your Prize Picks lineup. Whether it's points, rebounds, assists, take your pick of more or less for your shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash today. Turn your playoff hot takes into tickets to basketball's championship series. Start with a play-in round. Every lineup you make on Prize Picks will enter you into the Take-Two ticket sweepstakes, which could get you and a +1 a VIP trip to the ship. So here's what you do. You download that Prize Picks app today. You use the promo code ESPN700. You get $50 at checkout when you play that first $5 bet. You do not even have to win the $5 bet to get the $50. It's on the house. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700. And you get $50 when you play that first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game all season long. All right, tonight I'm going more for Tyrese Halliburton, 15.5 points and rebounds. That feels like easy money to me. I'm going to go less on Jason Tatum, 27.5 points. I hate to say it, but I'm going to go less on Jalen Brunson with 30 points. I'm going more on Giannis for 33.5 points, and I'm going more on Nikola Jokic, 52.5 points, rebounds, and assists combined. Prize Picks, run your game all season long. All right, couple quick things regarding the NBA playoffs I was thinking about last night, and then we'll get to some college football with Kyle Bonagura. I say often, and if you listen to the show, first of all, thank you. Hello, how are you? Second of all, superstars in the NBA, they get it done on the road in the postseason, but they also get it done in the biggest moments. When the big moments present themselves, star players are ready. So to start the game last night, Golden State, Houston, Stephen Curry just couldn't get any space because, of course, Ime Udoka and the Houston Rockets are going to do everything they can to blitz him. They're going to do everything they can to get the ball out of his hands, and they're going to do everything they can to make him a facilitator and not a shooter because there's never been a shooter in the history of the game like Stephen Wardell Curry. Jimmy Butler could not move at all to start the game, and Draymond Green got into foul trouble and then, of course, picked up a tech and then a flagrant one. Honestly, I think that flagrant one should have been a tech, and Draymond should have been ejected. For all the conversation that you hear around pro basketball that Draymond gets picked on, he very much does not. In fact, more often than not, he does not have the same sort of treatment from the officials that other players do. He should have been thrown out last night. Okay, I'm not a Dylan Brooks fan at all. I'm not sure if anybody is. He's a tough guy to root for. But basically, the three superstar players for Golden State did not get it done to start the game. It wasn't until the second half and the fourth quarter, for the most part, Steph got it going there in the second, that those three stepped up and made game-winning plays when the biggest moments manifested. So Steph started hitting shots there in the fourth quarter. He had that massive corner three with about 2.5 minutes left to tie the game. Draymond Green had 2 or 3 massive defensive stops against Şengün, Alperen Şengün, the really talented Rockets center who went for 31. Şengün, when Draymond was the primary defender, went 3 of 12. He was 9 of 16 against everybody else. And when the Rockets had a chance to take the lead after Golden State went up 1 because Dylan Brooks made a boneheaded foul on Jimmy Butler's corner 3, Houston was anticipating a switch, but Draymond called the switch off and guarded Şengün one-on-one and got the stop. And then Jimmy Butler got one of the, like, you're not going to see a lot of people talking about big rebounds. You're going to hear people talking about big shots, big threes, big stops, whatever. That was a grown-ass man rebound from Jimmy Butler to seal the win. So all three of the players for Golden State that are Hall of Famers, I mean, certainly Steph and Draymond are, my guess is Jimmy will be as well, made game-winning plays down the stretch after the young players kind of lifted them to start the game. Brandon Podziemski was really good to start. The Quentin Post kid came off the bench and knocked down a couple of threes. And when I was watching it, I always try to juxtapose my basketball, my NBA basketball kind of takeaways to what we're dealing with here with the Utah Jazz. And watching the Golden State-Houston game off the heels of watching the Cavs just absolutely blow the brakes off the Miami Heat, just once again made me think back to the Quinn Snyder, Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, Joe Ingles, Bojan Bogdanovic, Mike Conley, Utah Jazz, and really what a calculated risk Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck decided to take by moving on from Mitchell at the age of 25 as he was just entering the prime of his career, moving on from Rudy, who was in his late 20s, and some of the other pieces. Bogdanovic was getting older, Mike was getting older. But what really stings about the Jazz electing to pull the ripcord on that group is they were learning step by step about what you have to do to win in the playoffs. And that's how this thing has always gone. Don't forget, John Stockton, Karl Malone did not make the NBA Finals until their mid-30s. They needed 12, 13 years together before they actually were an NBA Finals team. Can you imagine in like 1988, 89, after the Jazz took the Lakers to 7 games in 88 and then got smoked by Golden State the next year? Can you imagine Scott Layden trading John Stockton and trading Karl Malone because he didn't think they could get it done because they didn't get it done in their mid to late 20s? That would have robbed us of the best basketball that we've ever seen here. That would have robbed us of the NBA Finals with Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls in town. It would have robbed us of the best Jazz basketball era that we all witnessed and we all saw. But that Jazz front office, and look, I know it's a different time, and I know conversations like this are complex and nuanced, and we could get into the whole, like, was Mitchell going to leave? Was he done with the entire thing? Quinn Snyder saying in his press conference before he left our market, he didn't see any way forward. I know it's a little bit apples and oranges, but watching the way Donovan has evolved and elevated his game, just to be a more comfortable leader and more comfortable facilitator and also more engaged defender under Kenny Atkinson and this Cleveland Cavaliers group that I don't think will be the Boston Celtics. But watching the Mitchell maturation and feeling like we were robbed of having that here will always make me wonder whether or not that was the right move. And the dirty little secret and the sad part of the reality of our current NBA team is they are not a Cooper flag away from being competitive. They are not 2 or 3 pieces away from being competitive. They are probably 4 or 5 roster pieces and roster upgrades away from even being a playoff team. Like if you're juiced on being a play-in team, 9 or 10 seed, all right, that's fine. But if you look around the landscape of the Western Conference, This calculated risk the Jazz took 4 years ago has not paid near the dividends that anybody thought that it would pay. Some of the draft capital from the Gobert and Mitchell trades have come in, but the draft selections that have been made have not popped. They have not proven to be players that we can rely upon to help this franchise grow back to respectability and competition. And watching NBA playoff basketball this year, unfortunately, has reiterated my belief that the Jazz are a marathon away from even being decent. We'll switch gears. Coming up on the other side, Kyle Bonagura will stop by. We'll do some college football and some college football and some soccer if time allows. We're going to bring in Tim McMahon for NBA Daily Assist. Kalen Jones, Sam Brockhouse, busy Tuesday show. And it's good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. Alex Jensen and his staff to fill out. Of course, plenty of time before the season gets rolling. But our first guest on this Tuesday afternoon covers college football for ESPN. It's been a number of months, but pleased to welcome Kyle Bonagura back on the show on a Tuesday. Kyle, happy Tuesday, man. How you doing?
Good, Spence. How are you?
I'm good. I was looking at your, I don't know, Twitter or X, whatever we're calling it. You have not been very active on the socials as of late. What's been keeping your attention?
Everything else that matters, I guess. I just kind of found that the more time I spent on social media, the less I was getting out of all of it. And I think, if I put more effort into the stories I'm writing and care more about those sort of things as opposed to kind of gaining followers on social media, like I'm probably better off long term, just like how I feel about the job and just kind of day to day. So yeah, I kind of just stopped seeing the value for the role that I do. For the newsbreakers and people like that, I think there's still value for that. But when you're kind of doing feature stories and digging on specific subjects, I just don't think it really adds much anymore.
Everything else that matters was such a great Kyle Bonagura answer. That was right on brand. A perfect answer, buddy. All right, I wanted to start today because you're familiar with Deion Sanders and Shedeur Sanders in Colorado and have covered that program. And, of course, I'm not sure if you heard, Kyle, because you're not on social, but Shedeur slid a little bit in that NFL draft all the way down to the 5th round. And it's always interesting juxtaposing NFL talent evaluators to what the media believes is going to happen. And maybe this is just as simple as NFL people don't believe that Shedeur is worth spending a high pick on, and maybe it's more nuanced and complex than that. I just wonder what your takeaways are from watching Shedeur slip all the way to the 5th round.
Yeah, no, I paid pretty close attention to this. I wrote a little bit about so it was part of our kind of draft coverage leading up to it. And so I was really curious to see where he went, where Hunter went, kind of where all the players that I kind of paid a close attention to during their college careers landed in the draft, right? It's kind of graduation day in that sense. And so I think there's a lot to it, right? It's a very complex issue when we're talking about Shedeur and why he fell or why he didn't fall, or why everyone just had him wrong and he didn't fall. He just ended up where he was supposed to be. But I think like the prevailing thought that I tend to agree with is, look, if he was worth all the other stuff that comes along with him, if his talent was that good, if he was really a top 5 talent, he would have gone there, right? NFL teams would have decided that if he adds wins, right, if he's gets you those results, the things that matter, then you can kind of put up with the kind of the circus that kind of comes with everything Sanders these days. But after the evaluations were complete, they determined, and this is kind of where I felt too, is that he really wasn't that great. I mean, there was a lot of things he did really well, sitting in the pocket, throws a beautiful ball, took a lot of sacks. I thought there was a lot of stat padding going on. The story that I've kind of told friends over the last few days kind of illustrates kind of why I didn't really view Shedeur as kind of a winning player. Early in the year, it was the first game of the year, actually. I was there in Colorado. They're playing North Dakota State. It's a one-possession game, a minute and like 45 seconds to go, somewhere in that range. So you had a chance to North Dakota State had one timeout left. So you had a chance to run the ball 3 times. It would have taken you down to about 10 seconds, and you could punt it away. The game's over. Instead, on first down, he checks to a downfield pass, which was just a completely bizarre decision in that game state. And then on second down, they pass again, incomplete. So they basically gifted North Dakota State a timeout in a chance, in a time of the game where they could have just completely ended it. North Dakota State ends up getting the ball back. They march down the field. They come up a couple yards short of a 30, like a really lengthy drive with 30 seconds left. It ended up costing them the game. And so I just felt like that moment for me kind of illustrated that he was more about his stats and kind of all the other stuff than winning. And that's just one example. And maybe that's a little harsh to point that out, but I think there's like a lot of examples like that shows that this kid wasn't really focused on the things that NFL teams wanted him to be. And so when you're now all of a sudden you're not drafting a starting quarterback, you're drafting some guy to compete to be the backup. Now you have someone whose dad is a A-list celebrity. He generates headlines like few people do in sports and pop culture. He's going to be calling for him to start. That's inevitable, right? We'll see that soon enough with the Browns. And if you're the head coach, if you're the GM, do you want to deal with that for a backup quarterback? Probably not. So, we could talk about this for days, but that's kind of the kind of where I started my thought process in evaluating everything with Shedeur.
Do you think his dad did him a bit of a disservice? Because you hear all these things where it's like, well, Deion used to sandbag interviews too. It's like, well, he was the best cornerback in the history of football. Like, even if 2 or 3 teams were turned off about Deion, somebody was going to take him and somebody was going to sign him because he was just that good. And to your point and how you articulated was really, really good. Like, with all of the questions that just simply surrounded Shedeur as a prospect, if you remove all the intangibles and everything on the outside looking in, just as a football player, it appears to be pretty clear that the talent evaluators didn't necessarily see him as somebody that they were comfortable taking a high pick. And I don't want to say wasting on him, but as far as like maybe the example he followed from his father and Deion himself being front facing about he is a top 5 pick, and even at one point alluding to maybe getting involved and hearkening the whole, Eli Manning situation. Do you think maybe his pops did him a bit of a disservice during this process?
Yeah, completely. I think that's pretty clear that, look, there's a lot of benefits to having Deion Sanders as your dad, right? There's a lot of ways that he's been very helpful, kind of shepherding him along his career. But in this case, not only is he Deion Sanders and been very vocal about all those things, I mean, it was just a few months ago where, there was speculation that Deion Sanders was going to be a candidate to be an NFL coach, right? So imagine you're the head coach, you have Shedeur on the bench, you're losing, he probably doesn't deserve to be in the game, but now you're hearing all this outside noise. Now you're probably hearing, should Deion Sanders be the coach, right? And that's an element that didn't exist with Eli that kind of adds to this in a way that, I mean, you probably saw the clips of the draft room for the Browns. They didn't look thrilled to be, having picked Shedeur Sanders, and it's certainly possible that was taken out of context, but it's also possible that they were not thrilled knowing that every single day with that guy in the building is going to be examined in a way that it wouldn't have been had he been somewhere else. And so you certainly benefit for being Deion's son, but there's a lot of other stuff that comes with that. And I think in this case, it cost him a lot of money.
So his teammate, Travis Hunter, goes 2, and another player that you watched, another player that you covered. I wonder what do you anticipate Jacksonville doing with him? I mean, a lot of conversation about whether or not whoever drafted him was going to want him only on offense or allow him to play on both sides of the ball, which he did at the highest of levels in college. And he was one of those players, Kyle, every time I watched, it's like, yes, he is one of one. He is a unicorn. He is as unique as any prospect I think that I've seen in a long time. Do you think we'll see a two-way situation for Travis Hunter in Jacksonville? Every time Travis is asked about it, he's very clear, salient, and front-facing, like, yes, I want to play on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I just watched a video today of kind of showing his arrival in Jacksonville, some of the behind-the-scenes stuff there. And he was talking about how he wants to get the playbook, and then he corrected himself. He's like, actually, the playbooks, plural, because he needed offense and defense. So I think, all the signs indicate that, certainly to start off, they'll work him on both sides of the ball and, use that information to kind of inform what the decision is during the season. I think it makes sense to let him try both. I don't know if in the NFL he can, go full-time both ways. I mean, he didn't start playing both ways full-time in college either. He kind of worked himself into that as he became more experienced and more comfortable at the college level too. And that's even starting, down at FCS with Jackson State. I've discussed this a lot with, friends and colleagues and, the people in the media, just like, where is he better? And I think the fact that there isn't really a consensus, that you have people arguing both sides is really probably the most interesting takeaway, that it's not clear. He started as a corner. That was what he got recruited as. But, last year he won the Biletnikoff Award as the best receiver. And part of that is just name recognition. And the other candidates were, Nick Nash from San Jose State. He's not going to generate a lot of hype nationwide. So maybe he benefited just from that to a degree, but still he had over 100 catches, something like that, for well over 1,000 yards, was unguardable at times, it seemed, in the Big 12. So he's probably the most interesting prospect of his generation, because you said it, he's one of one. No one else has been valued in the same way. I mean, you probably have to go back to Dion, right? To see another guy who got legit run on both sides of the ball, and even that was like packages and ways to kind of use him as either a decoy or to get him the ball like early in a play. So Jacksonville's certainly a team that could use the help on both sides, and it's almost like you got to use 2 picks with 1.
The past couple of years, it's been an interesting kind of situation to analyze, like former Pac-12 quarterbacks who have gone on to do great things. And look, when Jaden Daniels was at ASU, I thought he was fun. I thought he was good. And he was almost a Ute, actually, which is kind of an interesting subplot. But then he goes and wins the Heisman, and he goes and just takes the world of pro football by storm as a rookie. And I don't know that I thought he was going to be that when he was out in our footprint. And I'll ask you the same thing about Cam Ward, who certainly was at a school well in Wazoo and put up great numbers. But kind of same thing. I don't know that I ever thought he'd be the number 1 pick in the draft. He transfers to Miami, of course, has a great year, and he goes 1 in the draft, and it appeared to be a consensus. Did that surprise you at all? What was kind of some of your takeaways watching this journey for Cam Ward?
So I think by the end, I think it was pretty clear that was going to happen. So I wasn't like I guess the better way to phrase it, my answer is that if you would have asked me, 2 years ago, if I thought Cam Ward would be the number 1 pick in the draft, they would have been a resounding no, absolutely not. I thought he was a guy who would progress to the NFL and have a chance to be a pro, maybe even for a long time. But I think the step forward he took at Miami this year was really impressive, right? I mean, they had arguably the best offense in college football, and a lot of that was because of him. He had a lot of really special moments. He sits in the pocket well. He's athletic enough to extend plays. I thought his decision making got a lot better as he progressed through college football, and I think a lot of people, and it's maybe more people are familiar with his story now, but keep in mind too that he ran the wing tee in high school. So like this isn't one of those guys who was bred by some quarterback guru in the 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, and it was essentially a finished product before he had a chance to really start going. He's someone who had a lot of growing to do when he got to college because it was his first time in a passing offense. And so he had a chance to do that down at the FCS level with Ed Incarnate-Word, advanced his career at WSU and kind of had that graduate level of education at Miami and really did a good job developing. I think, and going back to Shedeur, right, I think Cam Ward really looked good in some of those workout videos that got published between the two of them where he said, I want to be known as a football player. Shedeur's talking about, let's cut a song together or something like that. And Cam was very focused on football and football only. So I think all of those, the 2 progressions there, I think it says a lot about both of those players.
Kyle, I want you to know that I'm a grown-up who can do hard things. So even though you don't tweet out your pieces anymore, I was able to find a couple of them. So I want to ask you about the piece you wrote about Abdul Carter, who a lot of people believe, when we're talking about the 2025 NFL draft in 10 years, this is the dude we're going to be talking about. Take us through this journey, positional change, and what do you think, what type of difference can he make for the New York Giants?
Yeah, so he's a fascinating guy because I had a chance to speak with him quite a bit down in Arizona ahead of the quarterfinal game against BYU. That's where I did a lot of the interviews for that story. And really quiet guy, really cerebral guy. And I don't think you necessarily think that when you think about, big time pass rusher at a big school, right? You kind of think, oh, this guy is probably confident and brash and all those things, but he is not that. He is an introvert. He talked to me a little bit about, playing chess and the analytical side of football and those sort of things, but had a really good feel for who he was and how he could impact the game. So the story goes, he came in as a linebacker. He asked for the number 11 jersey, which is, we saw him try to do that again this week for Lawrence Taylor's retired 56. So he asked for the 11 jersey at Penn State, which is a big deal there. There's a lot of significance. A lot of, all-time great players have worn it there. He goes through summer workouts as a freshman. They're impressed by him so much that they go ahead and grant him that request. He gets the 11. And then from day one, he is wrecking havoc as a linebacker. But 2 years in, he gets to that offseason after his sophomore year, and he's like, look, I think I was a little bit out of place. He's playing weak side linebacker. He does a lot of, hand in the dirt, rush and edge type stuff, but really thought he should be as a defensive, be playing consistently as a defensive end, not dropping into coverage and those sort of things, even though he was physically capable of doing so. Anyone who watched Penn State, it probably didn't take a lot of time to, if you're watching for the first time, you're like, oh, who's 11, right? He just, every snap, it feels like he was getting to the backfield, disrupting plays. His numbers were good. Weren't generational or anything like that, but he affected the game in a way that few players did. And I think that NFL teams noticed that well before he made the position change. And once he added some weight, kind of got his body to a place where he can be a defensive end at the next level, it was pretty clear that he was going to be an early pick very early last year. And so I had a good time talking with him. His teammates were all very complimentary of him. Coaches raved about him. Everyone I talked to about him, and look, this isn't so unusual, but it was all very believable, and it felt genuine that they really believed in this guy's talent and who he was as a person.
All right, moving over to a little Utah football. And look, it is April, so I'm not going to ask you to break down there too deep for August and September. But I just kind of wondering what your confidence level is. Coach Witt is back. I didn't necessarily cover the will Kyle stay or leave story as deep as everybody else. He simply is a coach under contract, and my thought was he did not want to go out like that. The spring game was last week, Forever 22 game. I was up there. I was able to catch up with Kyle and Morgan Scalley and met Jason Beck for the first time. There's a new quarterback in town, and Devin Dampier. There's a grip of new players because, of course, there is. That's not a Utah thing. That's a college football thing. But after failing to even qualify for a bowl game and winning 5 games last year, I do feel like maybe the pressure is off. Last year, everybody, including me, and I believe you, picked Utah to win the Big 12 and advance to the expanded 12-team CFP. And, there are a lot of outlets that have already done the whole way too early Big 12 projection thing, and Utah is mid-table on most of them. So maybe taking that pressure off will help. But do you have some confidence that year 2 in the Big 12 will at least look better than year 1 for the Utes?
Yeah, I mean, there's a very fundamental way to answer that is it can't be much worse. You go 2-7, so you're probably going to do better in the conference, right? Because it's the record was what it was. But that said, I just have never lost faith in Kyle Whittingham as they've kind of had these 2 weird years, right? There's a lot of factors outside of his control that contribute to that. You and your listeners know that probably even better than I do, and so I think. With those circumstances, it wasn't that the program was falling apart. The defense was among the best in the country. The quarterback thing was such an outlier in terms of how a program should operate. The fact that they didn't have a capable backup, someone who could step in and win games 2 years in a row, probably problematic, right? But when you add a quarterback like they did, who's has documented success, and you bring his coordinator with him, and so there's no learning curve with the offense. That's a formula that has worked several times in college football in recent years. I mean, we just talked about Cam Ward. It worked for him at Washington State. We saw it with Caleb Williams at USC. The list goes on, right? And so I think there's enough reason to be optimistic and confident that they can be a contender again in the Big 12. If even allowing for some drop off on defense, because that team that side of the ball was so good, I think the offense will be a lot better. But at the same time, I think the conference is really improving too. Like Arizona State, their improvement was pretty remarkable. I mean, Iowa State probably takes a step back. Those receivers they lost were really good. I think Colorado without Travis Hunter probably takes a step back. But it's such a deep, there's so many teams now, right? So it's not like you just have to beat 9 other teams, 10 other teams. There's just so many teams who are adding and really competitive. And you mentioned kind of the state of college football. Everyone's new. And so Texas Tech has a lot of money in their NIL program. They're bringing in a lot of talent. They've got, arguably the best transfer class in college football if you're into those sort of rankings. And so, yeah, look, do I think Utah deserves to be the favorite to win the conference? Absolutely not. I would think that would be kind of ridiculous to say here in April. But, yeah, look, a lot of teams have come out of nowhere to improve significantly, and Utah certainly wouldn't be coming out of nowhere. The track record is there. They've had the dip, but there's enough experience and credibility in that room to allow for a quick return to prominence.
Regarding the future of college football, it is an exercise in futility to try to predict any of this stuff, and we continue to await the final settlement with the House versus NCAA, as Judge Wilkin has basically given them a couple weeks to change the roster limits before she will even entertain the settlement. But I want to revisit kind of your belief about where we could be headed whether or not there is a pro model on the horizon, whether or not there is this big super conference on the horizon with two conferences that look like the AFC and the NFC, or, the Trump administration comes in, some of the changes to the Department of Education and other departments have kind of changed people's perspective about their belief about what the future of college football looks like. What's the Kyle Bonagura belief about what the future of the sport looks like?
Yeah, it's. I still think it's trending in a direction to where it's like the pyramid will keep narrowing at the top, right? And eventually, just like we saw the Pac-12, rest in peace, go away. I think eventually that same sort of evolution feels like a logical way this could go, right? Because if you are in the SEC, right, you're Alabama, Georgia, we all know the names, and you're in the Big Ten, and you're Ohio State, and whoever else, Michigan, we all know the names. Are you comfortable sharing equal revenue with, with your Marylands of the world, with your Vanderbilts of the world? Maybe, but also maybe not, right? I think it's completely reasonable to expect those teams at the top to, at some point, want a bigger slice of the pie, right? Or there's another kind of break off where these teams all at the top say, hey, like, look, you take the top, whatever the number is, pick one at random, 16, 32, whatever, 40, and say, hey, if we get together, then look at how much more money we can make. The college programs and university have been operating with that mentality for a while now. And so the idea that it all of a sudden would go away seems, I don't know if I'd buy that. There's no logic to indicate why that would stop. We are at a pro model. These guys are making money. There's going to, once the roster rules are all set, there's going to be a clear path forward on how to manage roster, how to distribute, some of the shared revenue stuff that's part of all this madness, right? I'm having trouble keeping track of all the matriculations myself. And so once you have these programs that were able to pay players directly, now at one point, look, Kyle Whittingham was actually talking about this a couple of years ago. I remember him being very clear, look, we're going to get there. It's just a matter of when. Are we going to get to a point where eligibility even matters? Are you going to say is the 4-year eligibility model? We've already seen that pushed and tested in several different ways, whether it was COVID, whether it's junior college or red shirts or transfers, right? It seems like at every turn that players have fought for more eligibility, that came out on top recently in the court system. So eventually, do you get to a place where, there isn't a 4-year eligibility cap? I don't know. It seems crazy that college football would eventually get there, but I don't think I would write it off either. And whether that's in 5 years or 10 years or 15, it doesn't matter. Eventually, I think all those things are going to be tested. And, like you said, exercise and futility, there's just so many moving pieces to have a great idea of where it's all headed. I don't think anyone can be confident of that other than change is just going to continue to be inevitable.
Before I set you loose, I am going to sneak in a soccer question. And no, I will not ask your take on the current battle at left back for RSL. But I will ask you, we have this young player whose star continues to rise, Diego Luna, who had another brace last week in San Diego. And for whatever reason, the Olympic coach didn't like him, but Pochettino seems to like him. And he's had a couple of national team call-ups. There's this great, snapshot of Diego breaking his nose and continuing to play and really endearing himself to all the goobs that love the U.S. men's national team, Sam's Army, whoever they are. Do you think there's a chance that Diego Luna will be on the U.S. men's national team for the upcoming World Cup here in this region?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think there's a chance he'll be with them this summer. I think there's enough, and I think the fact that Pochettino does like him, I think that's probably the best indicator that he has a chance. I don't think if I was projecting the roster today, I'd include him on it, but his trajectory is rising in a way to certainly, you can't rule it out right now. I think just the way he's playing in MLS has been really impressive. He's a guy I've actually paid attention to for quite a while. Cause I live here in the Bay Area. He's from around here. Was actually, I believe he was cut by the earthquakes at a really young age. And so he's someone that I heard that story early on. Then he's, with El Paso and kind of working his way through USL, gets the shot at RSL. Has really done an incredible job, not letting the early career disappointment stunt his growth. And I think it's really only a matter of time. I mean, enjoy him in Salt Lake for as long as you can, because he's a guy who certainly feels like he should be headed to Europe sooner rather than later.
Kyle, thanks, man, for the time. I always appreciate it. Have a great week, and we'll do it again soon, okay?
Sure thing. All right, thanks, man.
Kyle Bonagura covers college football, sometimes soccer for ESPN. Does not tweet anymore, but you can find his pieces up on ESPN.com. Stops by today, courtesy of our friends at IFA Country Stores. Any drive to the basket begins with the first step on the court. That's the ultimate power move. IFA's Step 1 crabgrass preventer and their lawn food is the first choice to give your yard the healthy green look you admire. The neighbors will be green with envy, so shop IFA online at ifa.coop or stop by one of their neighborhood stores today. All right, 1 hour down, 3 hours to go on this Tuesday. Tim McMahon joins us coming up next, NBA Daily Assist style, so keep it right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. NBA playoffs roll on tonight with 4 games, and one's about to start in about an hour. It is Milwaukee, Indiana. NBA TV's got a doubleheader, so does Turner. Orlando, Boston, Detroit, New York on TNT, and then the Clippers and the Nuggets also on TNT. Our next guest covers the league for ESPN and joins us on a weekly basis. Tim McMahon, happy Tuesday, sir. How are you?
Howdy, partner. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. You know, we always have this debate here in state about, like, who's the best local college basketball player to play in the pros, and it usually involves BYU players and Utah players. It's clearly Damian Lillard, who played his college basketball at Weber State. Just gutted. You know, he's one of our favorites around here. I wonder what you make of this entire situation. What's next for Dame and what's next for Milwaukee?
Yeah, unfortunately, what's next for Dame is a long, grueling rehab process. I don't know that Dame's going to be able to get back to the level that he's played at his entire career. Obviously, a mid-30s Achilles injury is devastating. And, the guy's work ethic speaks for itself, certainly his skill. It's a really difficult situation. And in Milwaukee, odds are they get bounced tonight. And then the clear big question will be, is this Giannis's swan song in Milwaukee? Is this when he finally comes to the conclusion that it's time for the next chapter of his career? And I think if you took a poll around the league, you'd get more people to say yes to that question than no at this point. If that's the case, it's a shame. It's going to be a really tough stretch for the Bucks because they have been all in on winning a title around Giannis for a while now. Obviously, the great news is they did hang a banner. The bad news is, they are out their own first-round capital until 2031, I believe. And, if Giannis does indeed decide that it's time to go, they'll make the best deal that they can. But it's going to be a while before the Bucks are going to be a competitive franchise again.
So what are the most likely and who are the most likely suitors if Giannis is on the market? Obviously, anybody would love to have a dude like that. And I do want to say, just for the record, I really respect what Milwaukee decided to do to go all in to try to surround him at any price, because Dame is making, I think, $120 million for the next 2 years. And Milwaukee, unlike, Denver, decided that they were going to do everything they could to maximize a generational talent while they had him. If this is it, and we are in Salt Lake City, we have a basketball team with tremendous draft capital and salary flexibility. I'm not sitting here saying the Jazz are going to make this move for Giannis, but what sort of deal do you expect if Giannis is dealt?
I mean, you've heard a whole bunch of noise about Brooklyn, and I'll be honest, I don't see how that makes sense for either side. I just don't. Like, for Giannis, okay, you can talk about a big market, but let's be honest, Brooklyn is the JV team in New York, and they'll have to give up a lot of stuff to get him, and they're not close to being a title contender. So that one, frankly, confuses me on both sides. I think Brooklyn needs to go through a rebuild. I don't see how trying to press fast forward to get Giannis in there accomplishes anything, and I don't see why that would be an attractive situation for Giannis. But that is the team that you hear the most. I think you're going to hear a lot about Houston, where clearly, hey, I've got a story coming out tomorrow about how Houston is a go-to guy and elite offensive engine away from being a real deal bona fide title contender. Giannis is 30 years old, still in his prime. Obviously, they'd have to give up a lot to get him, but they've got a lot of young talent. They've got a ton of assets with some of the deals that they've made. To me, the Rockets would be the team, the realistic destination that would make the most sense. But, I'm sure there will be plenty of teams that would be interested. And obviously the other thing that has to happen is the Bucks aren't just going to trade him. Giannis has to ask for it, and I'm not certain that he's reached that decision yet.
So Milwaukee's motivation would sound like what, Tim? Because is it when if they decide to go this route, when you trade somebody like that, you have so many options at your disposal. You could ask for 2 or 3 really good players to keep you afloat. You could decide to go all in on draft capital and cap space and maybe a couple of youngsters and then rely upon the future. Because if they are just simply looking to grab a bunch of draft assets and young players and completely go all in on just a tank or whatever, a team like the Jazz does make sense. But if they are trying to stay competitive and maybe even salvage another year with Dame if he gets healthy, maybe they do want, I saw some scenario about like a Karl Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges in New York. I have no idea if there's anything there, but what do you think Milwaukee would be looking for should they deal Giannis?
Yeah, I probably should have mentioned the Knicks. The Knicks have definitely been a team that it's no secret they're hunting for, top level superstar, and that's definitely a team that has been mentioned as well. Here's the thing: the Bucks can't go into a traditional full-fledged rebuild in the sense of a tank because they don't benefit from that. They've either got their picks gone outright or via swap again until 2031. So to do a total teardown doesn't make any sense whatsoever for the Milwaukee Bucks because they've blown through all their draft capital over the next several years while going all in trying to build around Giannis, trying to win another title with him. And I don't think that's a situation you regret. I mean, you don't get a guy like that very often. For Milwaukee, it was almost 50 years from the time they lost Kareem until Giannis was able to deliver a title for them. But it's put them they're in a really compromised position now because, again, typically if you're forced to trade this type of talent, then it is okay. It's like Houston did. It's time to tear it down when they had to trade James Harden and go through kind of a traditional rebuild that started to really pay dividends for them. You can't do that if you don't have your own picks.
Right. Yeah. It's true. Good point. Just while we're in the Jazz space, of course, I don't think we really can understand what their offseason plan is or will look like until May 12th when we know when they're drafting. But as you and I have discussed, as a result of the decision that Danny and Justin made to move on from the last good iteration of this team and stockpile draft assets and have very clean books, any of the teams that do elect to yard sale, I'm using air quotes, could look to the Jazz to grab some of their assets and utilize the books to shed salary. Are you hearing anything about what this offseason could look like for the Utah Jazz? Nobody has uttered the phrase big game hunting yet, Tim.
No, I don't think it'll be big game hunting. And obviously, let's be honest, the success of this offseason, you're going to have a pretty good idea, like you said, when you hear the lottery results. But, they are in a position where they can be opportunistic. They do have several veterans who are on large expiring contracts and would make a lot of sense for teams that are looking to clean up their books. They do have a bunch of picks to play with. Having said that, I know that the Jazz have a very long-term view at this point. I don't think that anybody's goal in that front office or even in that building is going to be, okay, let's put the best possible team in place for the 25-26 season. They're trying to be able to crack open a window as a contender, and they're not, one move or even one summer away from that.
Nope, they're not. And they're not one player, two players, three players, or maybe even four players away from being close. So this will take some time. 3 years now since the Jazz had spring basketball as far as an experience here in Salt Lake. So only time will tell. All right, you referenced the Rockets, and this Warriors-Rockets series has been must-see TV. Butler comes back last night, goes for 14 in the fourth quarter. Closing out this Houston Rocket team is going to be a royal pain in the ass. But what are your takeaways from the first four games of Golden State and Houston?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the Rockets aren't ready. They don't have the go-to guy that you need to compete with good playoff teams, and that's not a surprise. They're young. They win with grime. They've been a mediocre offensive team all season long, a good defensive team, a great rebounding team, but they are one major piece away from being a real threat to make a deep playoff run.
Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Phoenix has to do something. A lot of people draw a line between Phoenix and Houston. Do you think we could see some movement there?
Durant is a possibility. There will be internal discussions in Houston about whether that makes sense, how much would make sense in terms of cost to in the trade as well as there's going to have to be a contract extension. I don't know that I would call that likely. I'd call it possible. Booker's not possible. Phoenix is not trading Devin Booker this summer.
So do you think anybody on Phoenix could be available? Well, I guess the Brad Beal thing, he has his own. He's got the no trade clause, so he might be stuck with him. But anybody outside of Booker and Beal available on that roster then, yeah?
Everybody, yes.
Right.
Now, Kevin Durant's going to have say on where he goes. He's got 1 year left on his contract, is extension eligible. A team's not going to trade. I would be shocked if a team would trade for Kevin Durant as a rental player for just 1 year, given the cost that it would take probably to get him. And you just haven't talked to people in Phoenix, that they intend to cooperate with KD and KD's representation.
Lakers on the brink of elimination. You're not going to say they're done until they actually are because they have two generationally special players. I wonder, J.J. Redick elects to play all five of those guys every single minute in the second half. I mean, look, I'm not a psychologist. I just wonder if that was a message sent to the front office, like we just have no depth. We have nobody. Like, I'm going to go with these five players because I don't have any other options off the bench. LeBron didn't score in the fourth. Luka looked gassed. Finney Smith had a dunk that was short. What were your thoughts watching J.J. Redick simply go with all five of those players for every moment in the second half? And do you think the Lakers can get back in this?
Well, I mean, no question that it was a move that reeked of desperation. And it was a move that, I thought pretty clearly backfired. And look, there were times last year where Luka would play the entire second half for the Mavericks in the playoffs, but he wasn't coming off the longest injury absence of his career. He didn't have the conditioning issues early in the season that he did this year. And he wasn't barfing his guts out 36 hours earlier. So, obviously, it didn't work out. It's a highly questionable decision. Even with the roster that they have, I thought you had to at least get Luka and LeBron a little break in the second half. But they need better depth, and they need a real big man. That Jackson Hayes is a guy that they play 4 minutes in a playoff game and decide they don't want to see any more of. So I think that they are at least one transaction cycle, perhaps two or three away from being a real title contender in L.A. And, the other part of that, though, is, okay, how much longer is LeBron at 40 going to be able to play at this level?
Over the past 3-4 months or whatever, after Oklahoma City clearly established themselves as the best team in the West and maybe the best team in pro basketball, on a weekly basis, I would ask you to revisit a topic like who's the biggest threat to them. Is there a threat to them after watching what they did to Memphis round one?
I don't think next round will be easy. Whether it's the Clippers or the Nuggets, I don't think it's going to be easy. And obviously the Nuggets you're looking at specifically because Joker's just such a dominant force. But, man, the Clippers have been playing as well as anybody for like 2 months now. And Kawhi looks like the guy who's been a Finals MVP twice. He's got that kind of a spring in his step. They do have depth. They are a great defensive team. They do have a couple other guys who are legitimate shot creators. I think the Clippers are the biggest threat to the Thunder in terms of getting out of the Western Conference.
So that brings us to tonight. Obviously, a big game in Denver. Based off of what you just said, I'm assuming you're going to take the Clips to win the series. But what do you think happens tonight in Denver?
Well, I would take the Clippers to win the series, and I would change my mind if they don't win tonight in Denver. How's that for a cop-out of an answer?
Fair enough, man.
Listen, the Nuggets did lose a Game 7 on their own home court last season to the Wolves. That's unlikely to happen again. However, the Clippers do have a deeper team. There's no question in that, especially like the Russ thing had gone off the rails anyways. Now he's dealing with this foot thing. But Joker's got to play 46, 48 minutes a night, and he's just getting the crap beat out of him. The longer the series goes, I would say the tougher it is for that guy. And if he's not right, then the Nuggets don't have a chance.
The potential of a second-round series between the Timberwolves and the Warriors. And like I said, until LeBron and Luka are dead and done, I'm not going to say that series is over. But just like OKC, potentially Clippers, second round, Minnesota, Golden State. And I will give you credit because you actually pointed out Minnesota starting to kind of figure some things out at the end of the season when they finished really well. And, you know, it's been kind of interesting, Tim, because oftentimes in this Minnesota-Lakers series, Jazz fans know that when JJ decides to go small, Minnesota has kind of leaned into the whole, like, we can sit Gobert, and we feel comfortable doing that in a way that Quinn never did. Now, Quinn didn't have Naz Reid, so it's different.
Sure.
But the potential for that second-round series, what do you think that looks like?
I think it'll be a hell of a series. And, you know, Ant won't be scared, I can tell you that. He's been the best player in this series, in the series that features LeBron and Luka. Ant has clearly been the best player. But I think more important, or most important, is the fact that he hasn't, you know, like the last game, it's going down the stretch, he didn't play hero ball, which he's been guilty of really pretty much all season long. You started to see that turn a little bit down the stretch of the season, but some of Ant's best plays didn't show up in the box score. You know, but it's his willingness to, okay, you're going to throw two at me, let me get off the ball, and then, you know, boom, boom, boom. It's a wide open shot for a guy like Naz Reid. You know, Jaden McDaniel's been playing awfully well. So I think, you know, that, like, Ant's numbers and his production obviously pops off the box score page, but I think a lot of his growth is stuff that you don't necessarily see in the numbers.
Do you leave any space for Golden State to make this stuff interesting moving forward, something beyond winning this round and maybe even beyond winning the next round?
I mean, you have to leave space for it. They've got, you know, dudes who have won 4 championships. You know, they've been awfully good since they made the trade for Jimmy Butler, who's proven to be a phenomenal fit. You know, Jimmy Butler has willed teams with a lot less talent than this to the finals before. You know, like, I'm not ever going to be a guy who doubts Steph Curry. You know, Draymond's one of the great playoff kind of complementary stars, if that makes sense, of this generation. So, yeah, you've absolutely got to leave space.
All right, before I set you loose, you know, I'm going to draw a little parallel here because the big story out of the NFL draft is that Shedeur Sanders fell to the 5th round, and the media conversation surrounding the way the talent evaluators in the NFL do their job juxtaposed to the way the media analyzes prospects has been interesting. And in the NBA draft, I mean, when it comes to the draft, all of us on this side of the equation, you know, media members, you've got to be careful about, you know, going with what you're told from front offices because you're lied to and smoke screens happen all the time. I wonder what your experience has been like trying to cover the NBA draft, getting information from front office people juxtaposed to the way that the media analyzes prospects and how sometimes those two aren't even close to aligning.
Can I tell you a secret?
Go ahead.
I don't really cover the NBA draft.
Oh, all right. Okay.
I mean, seriously, we've got, you know, Jonathan Givony does that on a full-time basis. So does Jeremy Woo. The NBA draft is just days after the finals. I don't pretend like I'm studying these guys. I don't pretend like I'm doing a whole lot of intel. Once they're drafted, that's when they become my responsibility to cover. But I'm fortunate to work at a place at ESPN where we've got 2 guys who are great at that, who are, you know, have great eyes for talent, who also talk to people year round. I mean, these guys can tell you who the best 15-year-old prospects in, you know, the Czech Republic are right now. So, yeah, just to be real, like, the NBA draft, I've got a lot of things that are on my plate. The NBA draft is not really one of them.
Fair enough. All right, buddy. Thanks for the time. Enjoy the games tonight. We'll chat soon.
Appreciate you, brother. Tim
McMahon, fun night of basketball ahead, and it starts in just about 35 minutes with the Bucks and the Pacers on NBA TV. NBA TV and TNT have doubleheaders tonight. Milwaukee, Indiana at 4, and then the Magic and the Celtics at 6:30 on NBA TV. Early game on Turner's Pistons Knicks from MSG, and then big one tonight. Should be a fun one. Clippers Nuggets, Ball Arena in Denver, Colorado. All right, coming up on Friday, I'm really excited for this. We're going to be out and about. Encourage you guys to come say hello. Would love to meet you and shake your hand. We're going to be at the Fulmer Legacy Center. It's a legacy fulfilled. It's the grand opening of the Fulmer Legacy Center. The location is 10960 South Park Road in South Jordan. It's a milestone that's 40 years in the making, and it's going to be realized on Friday, May the 2nd, as the Fulmer Legacy Center celebrates the official grand opening. It's a 16,500 square foot community sports and wellness complex inspired by Utah's legendary boxing brothers, Gene Fulmer, of course, Jay and Don. And it's located in the South Jordan Sports Complex, minutes from the site of the current Fulmer Brothers Boxing Gym. The new center honors the enduring Fulmer legacy while building a dynamic future for youth and community wellness. The event is going to run from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Friday. Of course, we'll be there until 6. They're offering tours of the facility. We're going to have a ribbon-cutting ceremony and appearances by local leaders, dignitaries, and sports personalities. So, again, the ribbon-cutting ceremony starts at 11. So be out there at 11 o'clock on Friday at 10960 South Park Road in South Jordan. The Fulmer Legacy Center will serve as a hub for amateur boxing, youth mentorship, and community health programming, including fitness boxing for women, seniors, and individuals living with Parkinson's. The Fulmer brothers, known around the world for their success in professional boxing as well as their humble grit, spent decades mentoring hundreds of at-risk kids retiring after they retired from professional boxing. So come on out. We'll be out there. Really excited for this. It is 10960 South Park Road in South Jordan, starting Friday at 11 a.m. with a ribbon cutting. All right, we'll catch a quick break. Coming up in the 4 o'clock hour, we're going to mostly do football. It's Kalen Jones and Sam Bruckhouse. We'll go from there on a Tuesday edition of the program. So keep it right here on ESPN 700. Going to bring in Kalen Jones today. Kalen, good friend of the show. Talk some NFL football, some NFL draft. Kalen spent time with Sports Illustrated. He was with The Ringer. And now he's landed with our friends over at Netflix. A Brett Favre documentary coming out on Netflix over the next few weeks. I think May the 20th is that date. Big day because we're giving away golf to Bonneville. My track, my home track, Bonneville, great little muni course here in Salt Lake. It's the ESPN Festival of the Tees, powered by the Utah Golf Association. Each day of spring, ESPN 700 is giving away rounds of golf from to the best courses in the state. Listen to the Down and Dirty with Scott Mitchell from 10 to 11. The Sean O'Connell Show from 11 to 2. And this little radio program, The Drive with Spence Checketts, from 2 to 6 for your chance to win each day from ESPN 700 and the Utah Golf Association. Details can be found at ESPN700sports.com. Yeah, going to Bonnie today. Text line 877-353-0700, 877-353-0700. Text in right now. Let's see. What should we do today? Text in right now. Just give me the one Ute that was drafted in the NFL draft. Easy one today because, we want to be kind and we don't want to make you think too hard on the show. First person to text in, the lone Ute drafted in the NFL draft. We'll go to Bonneville on us. It's the ESPN Festival of the Tees, powered by the Utah Golf Association. ESPN700sports.com is where you go for more information. We also have a new partner on the program, our friends at Outlaw Distilling. So it's a new partner here on the ESPN Sports Network. Outlaw Distillery is a homegrown, grain-to-glass, nitty-gritty whiskey, vodka, rum, and moonshine. Moonshine Distillery right here in Salt Lake City. Outlaw Distillery is Utah-grown. Of course, with so much history here of cowboys, outlaws, mining, and more, Outlaw has everything on the spirits spectrum, from their spiced rum, vanilla bean rum, Outlaw coffee rum, honey bourbon, barrel-proof whiskey, vodka, and moonshine. They have it all. And they're embracing the Outlaw name by being rebellious and making some very unique spirits that aren't being seen or created by any other distilleries in Utah. Passionate group, happy to have them on board. If you want to take a sip of their spirits, you can either find their bottles in the local liquor stores or you can book a tasting. Tell them I sent you. It's an hour and a half as far as their tour goes, and you get to try it all, keeping your shot glass as a souvenir. Get your tour and tasting booked at outlawdistillery.com today. Their doors opened in 2015. It's only the fourth distillery in the great state of Utah, so deeply rooted in Utah history and tradition. Even the name Outlaw is inspired by legendary characters such as Butch Cassidy, born in Beaver, Utah, on the Outlaw Trail, which served as primary transportation route for many of the notorious Wild West outlaws. The vision for Outlaw Distillery is clear. Help show the world that some of the best spirits can come from one of the least expected places here in the state of Utah. I feel like Outlaw Distillery is a place that you need to check out. It feels like it's right in your wheelhouse.
It might be. I am dry at the moment. I am sober at the moment.
Proud of you.
But I am, as much as anything, very, very enthralled with the Wild West, the Outlaws. I may know in spend as much time, not now, but historically, on that as I do like sports and whatnot. So yeah, it might be down my alley.
Maybe we could open like a sports themed Wild West joint of some sort.
Oh, there we go. Well, we can just do a remote at Outlaw.
I'm an idea man. You know this. I'm just trying to think what that would look and feel like, because you have to have more of a hook than just like come watch sports and talk about Cowboys.
Yeah, it's fair. It's fair. Yeah, we'll just do a remote at Outlaw. We'll invite everyone there and have some shots and tours and go from there.
Well, let's chill with the shots. I mean, certainly at 2 o'clock, if you're doing shots, we need to have a conversation. You referenced something when we were interviewing Kyle Bonagura. Abdul Carter.
Yeah.
Goes to the Giants at 3. And certainly most of the draft experts I've read believe, and look, we should acknowledge that Travis Hunter is unique as any prospect we've seen in quite some time. But in 10 years, when we're talking about this draft, do you think we're going to be talking about Abdul Carter?
I think so. Now, I'm not saying you're not going to be talking about Travis Hunter. I just think that the surest thing, as far as if you go into an NFL draft and you have, maybe your highest floor, highest ceiling, and where you want that overlap to be the smallest, it's Abdul Carter. I really do think that he is when you look at the prototype that you want as a current NFL edge linebacker hybrid, right? You look at Micah Parsons. You look at players like Abdul Carter, yes, out of Penn State. So there's a little, there's a little overlap there, a little where you're trying to separate, the prospect from the fact that he's just a really good linebacker out of Penn State. No, he is a lot like Micah Parsons in the way that he can disrupt a game. Watched him live at the Rose Bowl. It's a guy who, even back then against Utah, was getting a lot of reps, getting a lot of snaps. I think was their starter even for that game. So I look at him as the surest thing. And, if Travis Hunter ends up being what some folks think he is on both sides of the ball, then yeah, that's probably the guy you look to in this class. But I think that is a huge if. Now, I think he's good, and I think he's going to be productive. But I have questions on the ability for a 165-pound, 5'10" corner to do those things on both ends of the ball like he did at the college level. I think he'll be productive. I think he'll be a fine player. But to replicate what he did at Colorado, I just don't see that. Quite to the level.
Yeah, I mean, look, we'll see what Jacksonville does. They need a ton of help. Every time Travis is asked about what he wants to be in pro football, he talks about his desire to play on both sides of the ball, but you've got to have a coach willing to do that. So we'll see what that looks like. I do find it interesting. We talked about it at the start of the show, and, I was trying to get a little info from Tim McMahon, who joined us last segment, about what it's like covering the draft, covering the NFL draft, covering the NBA draft. And, I'm not in the news breaker space of this industry either. A guy like Adam Schefter, a guy like Sham Charania, or, before he decided to take his job as the GM of St. Bonaventure, of course, Adrian Wojnarowski. There was a time in my career, maybe when I was younger, earlier on, I did effort a lot of information and tried to break things here or there. It is kind of part of the job to try to get some info and then, of course, bring it to the listeners. It's an exhausting way to try to do this job. I can remember Chris Mannix, who used to join us pretty consistently. For a few years before Chris landed at Sports Illustrated, he was with Yahoo, and he worked with Woj before Woj went over to ESPN. And when Woj was kind of rising up through the ranks, everybody was just like enthralled with how he was able to do what he was doing. And a lot of it is through agency relationships, because Adrian Wojnarowski, I don't think he is anymore because he's not in the space, but he was represented by CAA. And CAA is the most powerful agency really in all of entertainment, not just sports. They have actors, they have musicians, and then they have a lot of people that aren't necessarily front-facing. Broadcasters, certainly front-facing for sure, but a lot of behind-the-scenes people. And as a result of those relationships, Woj met a lot of other agents, not just that worked for CAA, but worked for other agencies, the Mark Bartelsteins of the world and such. And I asked Mannix on the show, like, you work with Woj, what is his day-to-day like? Like, operationally, how does he go about his business? And Chris told these wild anecdotes about Woj having multiple cell phones and checking them all at once, and then having to be glued to those phones pretty much all day, and then glued to your socials pretty much all day so you can disseminate information when it comes your way. And then the complicated part of it is trying to dig through the noise and trying to disseminate the information without furthering propaganda that clubs just want you to take to the masses to further a message they're trying to get out there, even if it's not true. And more often than not, actually, it's not true. And certainly in today's day and age of media, where so many teams have in-house media that work for the team, and I use media in air quotes, like the BYU TV guys or any podcast that his team run. That's not media. That's your propaganding a message that the team wants you to forward that oftentimes isn't true. You just want the public to really buy into the message you're selling. And again, oftentimes it's BS. And we talk about this a lot on the show as the public. What exactly do you want? Whether it's sports or politics or whatever it is, do you only want to reaffirm the beliefs that you already have, regardless if it's real, regardless if it's being propagated by charlatans that are looking for engagement in order to make money, right? Or if it's just being propagated by a team that just wants you to believe their message, even though it's pretty easy to see oftentimes what's true and what is not true. But you do have to learn to pay attention in a different way. You do have to call balls and strikes. You do have to call it like you see it. And certainly a big part of media these days is opinion-driven, not truth-driven, just opinion-driven. And that's what makes the NFL draft really, really interesting. And that's what makes watching Mel Kiper melt down on television for 3 days really interesting, because it's hard to know whether or not Mel Kiper was married to his Shedeur Sanders take, or he was just trying to be part of a TV show, which is what the NFL draft is at the end of the day. And say what you want about Shedeur Sanders, he certainly is a story because he's Deion's kid, and there was so much attention around Colorado football over the past couple of years. And also Shedeur was really good. I think one of the things lost in all this is that Shedeur Sanders is still a really good football player. He just wasn't the number one overall pick, and he wasn't a first-round pick. He wasn't a first two-day pick. He had to wait till day 3 in the 5th round. But I don't know that there is an event that brings more of a dishonest approach from both NFL talent evaluators and media members than the NFL draft. Every year, yeah, and you can pull up any mock draft that you prefer. Dane Brugler from The Athletic, who joins us from time to time, friend of the show, is really good at his job. He had Shedeur, I think, as the 43rd pick in his mock draft, so he didn't have him at 1. Didn't have him as a top 10, didn't have him as a first-round pick, but he had him at 43, and Dane's a really talented, media member who does a really good mock draft and works really hard to get all that information out there. And ultimately, everybody's just guessing, and it does bring this dynamic of media members that have no business analyzing draft prospects, but understand how much you want that content. And so it brings about this clickbait feel during this time of year where people just love the NFL draft. And if you're a college football fan, you want to know where the players that you love for your alma mater are going to go. And if you're an NFL fan, it is like the one time a year where hope is out there. And what are the holes that the team has? How many picks do you have? How many holes can you plug in the draft? Are you going to see a draft night of tremendous activity and a lot of trades? Is it going to be quiet? Like, people love the draft content. And it'll be interesting to see the interest in the NBA draft coming up June 25th. And we're going to have great coverage for you guys that night. It's going to be Gordy Chase. It's going to be Richard Smith. Looks like we might be out on location. It is a 2-day event. Round 2 will be the next day on June the 26th in the afternoon. So there's a chance that we're just going to kind of lean into that on our show the next day, maybe on location. We'll keep you up to date on that. But one of the things that I always find fascinating, and one of the ways I try to do this show, is I kind of have a unique prism because I've been in front offices and I've had a chance to do NBA scouting. And so I've been able to work with and listen to and learn from some of the best basketball minds that you're ever going to find. You know, the Dick McGuires of the world for the New York Knicks, and the Scotty Ladens, and the Dennis Lindsays, the Ernie Grunfelds, the Ed Tapscotts. And being in those rooms and listening to the way that NBA evaluators evaluate talent, and then leaving those rooms and listening to media members try to do the same job, or reading mock drafts and knowing how wrong they are, colors my perspective and my prism as far as how I want to cover these things. And ultimately, it really leads me to approach it differently, because we're all just guessing. And not many of us are willing to say that out loud, because we want to present ourselves as experts. We want to convince you that our opinion is the same opinion you should have. And we want to be right about our talent evaluations. And certainly all of us in the space enjoy being right. And I've had prospects that I've analyzed where I've been completely correct. And I've had plenty of prospects that I've analyzed that I've been completely incorrect about. I was excited when the Jazz drafted Trey Burke, and I was dead wrong, right? We all have prospects that we've analyzed, and we've tried to figure out whether or not their skill set will translate when they take the step up, which is really hard to do, because there's a human element to this that oftentimes is ignored. And the human element to the Shedeur Sanders storyline, as we talked about with Kyle Bonnegar earlier, has been really fascinating for me to kind of study and listen to other people talk about. And then after the fact, listen to those same people try to muddy the waters and flood the zone with misinformation and try to convince you that what they told you last week wasn't really what they believed. It's this entire ecosystem of liars and this entire ecosystem of grifters that really just want your engagement. And it's just so funny how the business has either evolved or devolved, simply has changed or progressed, whatever your adjective is, where you have guys doing these incredible victory laps about the things they got right while ignoring the things that they got wrong and never bringing them up again, just to paint themselves as experts. And all these grifters on TV, they do the same thing. You know, they want to lean into the draft projection they got right. They want to focus on, see, I told you so here or there. And I'm sitting there like, wait a second, I heard you last week talk about 4 or 5 different things that weren't even close to being true. But the difference in the gap between evaluators that work in the pro leagues and the grifters that work in the media has always been fascinating to me. And there are examples across the board in both the NFL and in the NBA. And I just think with this stuff, there were so many football talent evaluators that just didn't think Shedeur was the prospect that the Mel Kipers of the world thought that they were. And I'm not trying to run down Mel Kiper. I mean, he's been doing this for 42 years. I think this was his 42nd draft, if I read that correctly. And the dirty little secret continues to be the powerful television executives that have one motivation and one motivation only, and that is for you to tune into their TV show. They don't give a rip if Mel was right about his Shedeur Sanders evaluation. They don't. All they care about is whether or not Mel Kiper, the TV actor and character, put on a good show for you. And the thing is, he kind of did, right? Like, it was kind of fun watching him melt down every time another prospect was taken, every time another quarterback was taken, and it wasn't Shedeur. Mel melted down. Clearly wrong about his analysis if you take it at face value, but what was his motivation? Just to put on a good TV show. Was he fooled based off of his relationship with agents or maybe even Deion himself? Did he buy into the hype in a way that talent evaluators in the NFL just didn't, and therefore brought his approach on TV for you to be entertained? And it's always fascinating for me to kind of experience this just from the outside looking in, knowing the way talent evaluation works in the pro leagues, and then understanding the ecosystem of the media and how many dishonest people are out there, some taking calculated guesses and some taking educated guesses based off the work they do, but so many of them getting it wrong. And Porter, I think you talked about this yesterday when, ultimately we may be overthinking it. Is it fair to bring up the lack of humility he appeared to exhibit during the interview process? Probably. And there are conversations about him sandbagging interviews the way his dad used to, but that's such a false parallel because Deion was generationally special as a talent. So he could sandbag as much as he wanted. There are going to be talent evaluators that said, okay, maybe he's kind of an ass, but we still want him because he's that good. Shedeur is not near the talent his dad was. So if he followed the example of his father, I think his dad did him a disservice. But this could be as simple as football talent evaluators that work for teams taking emotion out of it and just saying, we don't think he's very good.
Yeah, and it was off air, I think, when I was talking to you and Smitty, you kind of asked my thoughts on it, and I just said, I think everyone is kind of making this a bigger story than it is, partly by design. As you mentioned, the ESPN stuff, the cliques that surround the Sanders family, just in general, like you're going to play into that. But ultimately, what I really thought happened over the weekend, Spence, was a mid-round quarterback got drafted in the 5th round. I thought he could have been a 2nd, 3rd, 4th round pick. But like I said yesterday, that also kind of depends on how the draft goes. Once all of those offensive tackles started rolling off the board, it doesn't matter what position you play. You understand that there's going to be, especially if you understand how the NFL draft works, there's going to be a run of offensive tackles. If you're a defensive back, you just got pushed down the line a little bit. Regardless of how good you think you are or where you sit in the prospect room, sometimes the NFL draft goes that way. Quinn Ewers also dropped several rounds farther than a lot of people thought he would be. Dylan Gabriel, these guys are one quarterback away as far as where Dylan Gabriel was picked and where Shedeur was picked. There was no one in between from the quarterback position, even though there was a full round of NFL draft between them. So you kind of have to look at how the draft usually plays out. from a positional standpoint, you have to look at the fact that, yes, the majority of like actual talent evaluators, not draft analysts, not NFL analysts that are just draft analysts during the week of the draft, and I love my guy Tony Jones. Tony thought that Shedeur was going to be the number one pick. That's a basketball guy. Tony and Mel Kiper might have been the only guys that I saw that said he would be the top pick in the draft. And then you have what I think is kind of the casual sports fan who then tune in on draft week and think, oh, Shedeur's going to be a top 5 pick, right? That's where it all comes from, because I don't really think a lot of the serious people around the draft really had any expectation of that happening. Thought he might be a second-round pick. Sneak into the first round? Maybe. But ultimately, yeah, I think this is a story around the Sanders that is getting way blown out of proportion because it's a story around the Sanders. And because, as you mentioned, Shedeur may have exacerbated, and Dion may have exacerbated the slide a little bit with how they handled NFL agents, NFL scouts, guys in the front office that aren't necessarily used to a player thinking he kind of runs the show already, especially when he's not his father, who was the best cornerback of all time.
Well, and also one more thing here. One of the jobs you have when you're building a roster as a roster constructor in pro sports is you have to mitigate risk, and you have to, mitigate distraction, and you have to eliminate as much of that as you can that's in your power. A lot of it's not in your power. Like one of the variables that, the Mel Kipers of the world don't seem to discuss very much, and one of the variables that makes all this stuff really hard and very complicated, it's why the great scouts are worth their weight in gold, is you do not know how an 18, 19, 20, like a young person typically between the ages of 18 and 22, sometimes it's a little bit older with the new normal of college athletics. It will be older oftentimes, 23, 24, 25, but the point still stands, how a young person will react to instantly becoming a millionaire, how a young person will react to instantly becoming rich and famous. Now, a lot of these young players now are receiving a tremendous amount of wealth prior to entrance into the pros, and I don't think we have enough data at our disposal to indicate whether or not that allows them to land a little softer with more maturity because they actually already have some money in their pocket. And maybe simply just aging a little bit is a good thing before they actually are thrown into this world of tremendous wealth and tremendous attention. But the highway is littered with the bodies, not literally, that's morbid, but of prospects that were highly thought of simply as talent that could not handle the sudden attention and did not know how to handle the sudden wealth, and did not have the right people around them to help them traverse that space, and had too many hangers-on, or had too many family members that needed to get out of debt, or family members that were using you and relying upon you as their golden ticket to change their lives, which has always been extremely unfair. It's why a good agent is worth his weight in gold. And by the way, Shedeur didn't have an agent. He hasn't signed one. And yes, he has a father as a mentor to kind of give him the answers to the test. But guess what? The answers to the test this year were wrong. I think he would have done himself a great service if he had outside representation that could sit him down and say, look, I don't give a rip who your dad is. I don't give a rip about the advantages you've had because of that. You are a talent that has a chance to have a long career in pro football. But if you want that, here's how you have to approach this process. And advice from an outside voice may have changed the entire thing. But it's always interesting when a story like this manifests to listen and read the reaction from media members that clearly are embarrassed that they got it so wrong, when the talent evaluators that actually work in the industry are the ones that we need to listen to all the time. The problem is we don't have as much access to them as we do with the media members that want to join shows and kind of spout off their opinion and their hot takes in order for engagement. We'll do some more on this coming up. 4 o'clock hour is all either pro or college football. It's Kalen Jones and Sam Bruckhouse. We've got the NBA playoffs tipping off in 3 minutes on NBA TV. It's the Bucks and the Pacers. 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. Busy Tuesday show. Keep it right here on The Drive with Spence Checketts on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. First game of 4 for tonight's NBA playoff action. Actually, just barely tipped off. It's the Bucks and the Pacers. Keep you up to date on that as the show goes on. Get back to some NFL draft stuff. Sam Bruckhouse, Sumer Sports, joins us, but a good friend of the show stops by on a Tuesday, and it's been way too long. Kalen Jones, happy Tuesday, buddy. How we doing?
I'm doing great hearing your voice, man.
Yeah, great to catch up with you as well. And it seems like every time I chat with you, you have taken another job and another really cool job as well. So I need the career update. I need the life update. What's going on with you now?
I mean, I'm very blessed, man. Media is not an easy industry to hold stable jobs as I've turned throughout my career, but I'm currently an associate producer for Netflix's Untold, the sports documentary series. And it's been about a year now. I've kept it low-key because there hasn't been too much to share. I'm excited because the first round of episodes that I was a part of, I really wasn't a part of. I was just getting an A. I was like that person in the group who didn't really do anything on the group assignment and got an A on it. This time around, had a little bit more of a hand in it, and I'm excited for our episode that's coming out called Shooting Guards about Gilbert Arenas and Javaris Crittenton and their gun in the locker room incident. So we got a couple more episodes coming up. It takes a few years to make these things, I'm learning, but it's been a really fun experience so far, transitioning over from journalism to the film space.
Very nice, Kalen. We are losing you a little bit on the cell phone, so I'm going to reset a little bit of a long question. I'm going to ask you to just move around a little bit, see if we can get a better connection. So Kalen Jones is our guest. He's been a friend of the show for 5-6 years. He was with The Ringer. He was with Sports Illustrated, with The Athletic, has now landed over with our friends at Netflix. So what has been this Gilbert Arenas doc that you have coming up, I wonder what has been this process, what the process has been like for you. I mean, I certainly will never forget this story. I am beyond excited to watch this, and as a lifelong, quite frankly, being around the NBA my entire life, somebody who's worked in it and has covered it for quite some time. Of course, I can remember Gilbert Arenas as a great college player and a very, very talented pro. And I completely remember when this news certainly came down and the fallout for both Gilbert and Javaris Crittenton. What's the process been like for you guys to make this?
Yeah, so when I joined about a year ago, the process had already started conducting interviews with Arenas, Javaris Crittenton, both people close to both of them, former teammates, those who witnessed the whole incident go down. And then obviously the police departments from Atlanta, who was kind of the fallout as far as Javaris Crittenton's side of everything. But when I joined, the process is, you have the editor or a couple editors who are in edit phase, and after you're basically trying to help them, nurture the story along, you send a few cuts to the big folks at Netflix. They send some notes back. You probably do that 5 or 6 times before you get a final cut in line. That process takes about a year. It's been really fascinating. But, it's really cool, Spence, because you know how it is with media scrums and most interview sessions, they're 5-10 minutes, and you're sticking a microphone in an athlete's face after, a huge moment. With documentaries, we get the luxury of sitting with subjects for hours. And so being able to get fuller context and provide that on a platform like Netflix is really special to be a part of.
All right, for our listeners that are going, who are Gilbert Arenas and Javaris Crittenton, because it is 16 years ago, let's revisit it, Kalen. So tell our listeners what went down Christmas Eve 2009.
Yeah, so Gilbert Arenas, as you were talking about, Spence, talented NBA player, multi-time All-Star for the Washington Wizards. He and Javaris Crittenton, who was a backup point guard on the team, young in his career, had been drafted by the Lakers, trying to save his career. During a flight home, the two of them they were playing cards on the plane. There was a debate over who owed who money, and between Gilbert and Javaris, it became sort of an emotional showing of manhood and challenging one another. You know how it is with your friends sometimes. Sometimes we have friends who take things a little bit too far. And while they're on their talking about bringing guns to each other, bringing guns to the locker room. And Javaris and Gilbert both ended up following through. They ended up pulling out guns on each other in the locker room.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're breaking up pretty fierce. Is there any way we can get you to relocate, or do you? Porter can call you back if you want. If you want to take a second, we can reconnect with you.
Man, I'm sorry, man. I'm trying to figure out a better spot in the hotel to speak to you from. I'm in Atlanta, actually. We're doing some interviews for another episode.
You sound really good right now. Wherever you're at, just stay right there. You sound
right
really
here,
good right. Okay.
Perfect. But yeah, the two of them got into a incident, showing a manhood, calling each other out on the plane. Both threatened to bring guns into the locker room, and I think we all have friends who take things probably a little bit too far, a little bit too literally, and unfortunately, they brought guns into the locker room, and both were suspended, given two of the lengthiest suspensions in NBA history. It essentially ended Javaris Crittenton's career, and Gilbert Arenas never really recovered after that. And so what we do is really examine the fallout of it. It's really tragic, honestly, like what ends up happening in Javaris' side of things. And as you guys are probably aware, Gilbert Arenas' son, Elijah Arenas, one of the top prospects in college basketball, he just recently, luckily survived, but there was a car accident out in L.A. where he was trapped in a cyber truck and was able to luckily get out. He was put into an induced coma, but he's awake now. And, we examined their relationship, Javaris' fallout. It's a really compelling episode and one of the best untolds I think will ever come out.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. What is the nature now for our listeners that don't know? Javaris Crittenton, a few years later, was charged with the murder of Julian Jones, 22-year-old mother of four. He pled guilty to manslaughter. He was sentenced to 23 years in prison. It was later reduced to 10 years, and he was released from prison last year. So, of course, a very sad story for a number of different reasons. What was the effect of the incident? Not the murder that Javaris committed, but the incident between Javaris and Gilbert and the gun incident. What was the effect that had on their relationship, and what is the nature of their relationship today?
Really did sort of torpedo things, right? Javaris was, personally upset at Gilbert because after the incident happened, after the NBA handed out or at least threatened to hand out the suspensions, Gilbert Arenas there's a famous picture or infamous picture of him, in the huddle, the team huddle, and finger guns at everybody. And, Javaris saw it as, Gilbert playing around and not taking things seriously. Their relationship, it took a few years for them to sort of mend things after Javaris had gotten out. They are now, I wouldn't say close, but, they're acquaintances, cordial, however you want to put it. They're on good terms. At this point, I know that Javaris has been on Gilbert Arenas' podcast a couple times at this point to discuss everything and kind of, air everything out. But, it's in a much better spot today. And as you mentioned, obviously there's a seriously tragic, portion of the story that, we do a really good job of getting into. But it's a really fascinating story. Like I said, I think it's going to be one of the best sports documentaries that comes out this year.
As far as, we referenced the player that Gilbert was, and, he ultimately, when you look at from a macro standpoint, because he was not super highly thought of as an NBA prospect coming out of college, I don't think he was a second-round pick. I don't think you can really analyze his career as anything other than a massive success based off of expectations. But from a Gilbert Arenas angle specifically, how did that incident kind of change the trajectory of his NBA career?
Yeah, like I said, things kind of fizzled out for him afterwards. He wasn't able to return to being, the superstar. He wasn't the face of the league. He was literally on the cover of NBA Live in 2008. I'm pretty sure I had that game. He was one of the faces of the league, and after that incident, the NBA did its job to protect its brand and made sure that he wasn't necessarily considered a face. For Gilbert, his career tailed off. He ended up playing in Memphis, Orlando. He was never really the same player. And so for him personally, though, I think that, and he talked about it in our episode, it played a role in him evolving and maturing as a man, specifically as a father. He's much more involved in Elijah Arenas' life. Gilbert, like I said, he's someone who's a goofball, didn't take things seriously. That incident helped change him to being a little bit more mature and taking things a little bit more seriously. And like I said, he's ensuring that his son isn't on a similar path to not taking things serious. And I think that's the reason why he ended up not going in the first round during the draft and why he wasn't considered as highly as a prospect, because he was so talented, but he didn't have maybe necessarily the elite work ethic. Obviously, every athlete has work ethic, the elite work ethic to keep him consistently at an all-star caliber level. So I think it changed him for the better. Obviously, it's unfortunate that it took that incident, but for his personal life, and we see him now, obviously, with the podcast, he's still a jokester, but there is a little bit more maturity that comes with the experience he's had.
In both pro sports and, if we're honest, in society, the topic of gun control is one that comes up often, and people feel very passionate about it, both on both sides of the aisle, wherever you stand. And of course, when it comes to the NBA or the NFL, oftentimes when a player is caught with a firearm without a license, or, they're pulled over and there's a firearm in the car, the leagues come under tremendous scrutiny to serve as an example for everybody else. How did this incident, if at all, kind of change the perspective or paradigm of pro basketball and the way that they view and handle gun control issues?
Well, the reason why the penalty was so severe, the suspension was for the rest of the season. I'm blanking on which season that was. It might have been 2008, 2009. But both of them ended up being suspended for the entire season. And for Javaris Crittenton, he was essentially blackballed from returning to the NBA. And then I think the severity with which the NBA came down was to ensure that, the league itself has had to overcome different types of stigmas, right? Like before the Magic Johnson, Larry Bird eras, obviously the league had a crack cocaine issue with its players. And so being able to rescue the league, its first with the Bird Magic era and the Michael Jordan, all that, the league was nervous about that being erased. When in the early 2000s, late 1990s, you had players who the league had to reckon with hip-hop culture coming to the surface, and players expressing themselves that way. So you had different points throughout the league history where it's had to grapple with perception, outsider perception, which ultimately affects its final dollar. With that incident, I think they made sure very, very strongly that it would not tolerate gunplay literally within its locker room. And so the penalties were super severe. And I think that how the league handled it is super fascinating. For Gilbert, I guess I'm telling the untold part of it here, but Gilbert explained that the league really came down fiercely upon him because he was trafficking guns essentially using private planes that the NBA was providing, because he had guns in Phoenix and he would bring them over to Washington, D.C. And so using the NBA's private planes. So he believes that the reason why the penalty was so severe is because the NBA didn't want that to be known.
When is this coming out? I'm telling you, I am giddy with excitement. This is going to be awesome.
It's coming out on May 6th.
Okay. Oh, nice. Right around the corner. So you referenced there some other and we've had Tony Vainuku on the program a couple of times. He's a Utah filmmaker who worked on the Manti Te'o documentary, Untold. What are the other projects that you have coming up, Kalen?
Yeah, so Untold has 2 more episodes. The episodes that are coming out are based on a social media guy named Liver King, and then also there's an episode coming out about Brett Favre. Neither of those episodes, I guess like the Hollywood of it, those weren't done by our production houses, the production house that I work with. We have a few more episodes coming out in the pipe that regard the NBA, regard Major League Baseball and the NFL. And unfortunately, I want to protect my job, so I can't say what it is yet. But I think that they will also be some compelling stuff. So I'm really excited about what we're working on, even what I'm here in Atlanta working on right now.
Yeah, I've loved all of them. I mean, Malice in the Palace, that was the first one I saw. Let's see, the other ones we have. I've referenced The Girlfriend Who Didn't Exist, Manti Te'o, and a lot of local ties here. The Rise and Fall of Ann One. I mean, I loved Ann One back in the day. I thought it was great. There's a ton of great ones. The one on Manziel was really good. I recently saw the one on Steve McNair. So what a cool. What a cool series for you to be involved in, man. I think that's great. I wanted to bring you into a conversation we've been having because in your former life, and you're still a very young person, you've just done so many really cool things. But I've been talking the past couple of days, Kalen, about, on one side you have NFL talent evaluators that actually work for the league and work for teams. And then on the other side, you have media members that kind of moonlight as NFL talent evaluators and draft evaluators. And oftentimes there's a massive gap between those two groups because if you're evaluating talent for a pro team or a pro league, you have to remove emotion from the equation and simply analyze the prospect you have at your disposal. Where on the media side, especially during the draft cycle, for whatever reason, people want so much engagement that they don't necessarily pay as much attention to the nuts and bolts of analyzing players, and they just want you to engage with their content. Which brings me to this Shedeur Sanders story, which has just been fascinating. Is this as simple as maybe media people getting this wrong and NFL talent evaluators just saying he's not as good as you people think?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. As someone who was on the media side of it, as you mentioned, back in, 2021, when we had Justin Fields, and I wrote a story that, drove a lot of traffic. I'm not necessarily proud of that part, but, the narratives that get stuck with particular prospects is very fascinating. And so you mentioned engagement, and I was thinking about it. I was talking to a friend about this. With Shedeur, I was joking. I was like, hey, I love him, but I don't think he's a first-round talent. I think he has a weak arm. I think he's a great prospect in that he's tough as hell and will hang in the pocket. I mean, he drifts a little bit, but he's willing to sit in the pocket and will throw over the middle. You can't. Those are two traits that I feel like generally, suggest that you can last in the NFL. That being said, he doesn't have the biggest arm, and he's not the biggest dude, so I'm not surprised at all. I would have taken less than 1.5 if I could have gambled on it, even though two quarterbacks went. But with Shedeur, it's really fascinating that, and I guess drafts in general, right? Justin Fields draft, there was Trevor Lawrence, all-time prospect. And we were still focused on the narratives that were surrounding Justin Fields. That's why I wrote the article. It's like, why are we talking about the negative about this bad prospect instead of there's other people that we can talk about? And same with Shedeur. We had a Shohei Ohtani-esque prospect in Travis Hunter who went number 2 overall. I think that's more dramatic. There is a one unicorn who wasn't selected number 1. I think that's way more compelling to me than, a quarterback that probably wouldn't have gone first overall in the stronger quarterback class, falling out of the first round. I think it's compelling because you guys know how it goes. First and foremost, college football fans are our most rabid and most passionate fan base in the United States. I think the other element of that is the Deion Sanders of it all. Granted, I'm young. I'm only 28. I was covered in my previous job. I covered a Colorado UCLA game when they were in LA. And my assignment was go follow around Colorado, go hang around the tailgates, go watch the game from the stands on the Colorado side. I've been told how massive, Deion Sanders, how big of a deal he is, and I understand that. But I understand it even more having been around these people who love and pray. And that's why Shedeur's number got retired. I don't think it's a great thing, but I'm not surprised. It's their church, essentially, the people that put on their pedestal. And so a compelling element of Shedeur being Deion Sanders' kid is why we're so engaged. And for him to be dropped all the way down to the 5th round, and you guys watch college football, I don't know if he's worse than Dylan Gabriel. I don't think he's a worse quarterback prospect than some of the other guys that went before him. So that gets a little funky for me. But as far as him falling out of the first round, I wasn't that shocked. I do think, like you said, the narratives that the media has to run with. The negative narratives are what drives content and attention, unfortunately. And I think that's what happened.
For sure. I wanted to follow up with this. Do you think his dad did him a bit of a disservice? Because the fact of the matter is, Deion Sanders could sandbag interviews all he wants. It didn't matter. He was one of the best, if not the best, cornerbacks in the history of pro football. And there were moments where Deion said things like, we're going to get involved where he plays, and it might be a Eli Manning situation. And Deion saying he's a top 5 pick. He should be the number 1 pick. And, you know, maybe the power of Deion Sanders swayed everybody, including Vegas, by the way. Did not meet just the media. Vegas at one point last year had Shedeur as the favorite to be the number 1 pick. Do you think throughout this whole process, Shedeur may have been let down a little bit and done a disservice by his dad?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I think it's fair to say, like you said, for him, let's put it this way. If you and I are running an NFL team and we have a first-round pick, we need a quarterback, why would we risk a quarterback who, again, he's not, no offense, not Josh Allen, right? Not Cam Newton, somewhere where he's supremely physically gifted. We're going to bet on the traits. Why would I risk, Deion Sanders potentially affecting our plan, with a first-round pick? The value is just not worth the risk. And even potentially a second-round pick or a third-round pick, because then all of a sudden the conversation becomes about that and that toxicity, if we're being real, as opposed to what can he provide for our football team and does he fit, as opposed to does daddy like where he's going. And I do believe that did a disservice to him in terms of where he ended up being landed. And, some people have written that both Shedeur and Deion needed that humbling. If the reports about him purposefully, not just bombing meeting in interviews, like purposefully being dismissive are true, then I guess on some level, yeah, he did need this sort of reckoning and humbling on some level. But at the same time, I do think that for Shedeur, while he, I would love to be in his shoes in the sense that I grew up as Deion Sanders' kid, but also, yeah, with being his kid, you probably have to be you're probably taught to be super confident and super brash on some level. So, there's we could go on for 2 hours about this. It's really fascinating to me, and sincerely. But yeah, at the end of the day, I do think Deion being a little bit not overconfident but brash and suggesting that he would be involved in where Shedeur lands did cost him at the end of the day upwards of $30 million or whatever it was that people have been able to project.
All right. Before I set you loose, I just looked up some details of the upcoming Untold, the fall of Favre, and this is a perfect topic and person, quite frankly, not just player, to do a documentary on, because it was such a wild ride as a player that not a lot of people thought highly of when he was a young college player, and ultimately becoming one of the most entertaining players in the history of pro football to play quarterback, and then the precipitous fall, Kalen, that quite frankly is still going on right in front of us. So before I set you loose, what can you tell us about the Favre documentary coming out next month?
Yeah, so from the cut that I've seen, to be fair, the production house that did make it was one of our associate houses. From what I've seen, it definitely centers around Jen Sturger, the woman who Brett Favre sent the inappropriate text to, who used to work for the Jets. And getting her perspective is super fascinating because, like you said, it's for Brett Favre, someone who was one of the most entertaining and quarterbacks in football. It's fascinating seeing how someone who didn't have power suddenly being in a position where they are elevated, similar to we were talking about with the Sanders. In Green Bay, Brett Favre was God, essentially. And for him to, have the power that he had as the face of the NFL, it's not easy to see, but it's fascinating to see how he misused that and wasn't maybe not aware, but using his power for good. I don't know how to articulate that, but it was unfortunate, and it is sad because, like you said, he was one of the most entertaining players ever. I love watching highlights of Brett Favre. There's no one who throws the football harder than him. But at the end of the day, where he's at right now and what he's been doing is it's super unfortunate. And seeing that dissent in real time, I think that we talked to people involved in the lawsuit, or at least a part of the Mississippi state government, who do comment on how unfortunate and sad it is that, he's been alleged of taking advantage of state funding. So it's a really fascinating doc, all things considered.
Well, Kalen, it's great to catch up. Proud of you, man. Sounds like it's a really cool thing, really cool experience for somebody that's already experienced a lot of really cool things. So enjoy the week, and we'll do it again soon, okay? Okay. Hello.
Yeah, he dropped.
All right. There you go. All right, Kalen stops by today courtesy of IFA Country Stores. Any drive to the basket begins with the first step on the court. That's the ultimate power move. IFA Step 1 crabgrass preventer and lawn food is the first choice to give your yard the healthy green look you admire. The neighbors will be green with envy. Shop IFA online at ifa.coop or stop by one of their neighborhood stores today. Sam Bruckhouse will join us coming up on the other side right here on ESPN 700. We do have an NBA game going on right now. There are 4 games tonight. So an early tip for those of us out west. It is Milwaukee and Indianapolis. A lot of people believe this might be the final time we see Giannis Antetokounmpo playing for the Milwaukee Bucks. They're off to a great start. We're through one quarter already. Milwaukee 30, Indiana 13. So maybe they can extend the series. We'll get back to some NBA coming up in a little bit. But our next guest joined us last week to break down some NFL draft storylines. Now it's time to look back on what we saw. Our buddy Sam Bruckhouse from Sumer Sports on a Tuesday. Sam, happy Tuesday, man. How we doing?
Happy Tuesday. It's Knicks game day here at 7:30 Eastern. So we'll be tuned into that. But for now, I'm ready to break down some draft.
Wait a second. Are you telling me, Sam, you are a Knicks fan?
I am. I live on 3rd Avenue in New York, so I'm a big fan of the Knicks.
Okay, all right. Well, this is kind of a weird radio situation in Utah where I am the host as a Knicks fan, and my producer Porter's also a Knicks fan. Are you a lifelong New York Knicks fan?
So I grew up in South Louisiana, and I was in a zone, if you remember all the RSNs, where I could catch both Fox Sports Houston and Cox Sports New Orleans. So I kind of grew up watching vaguely all the Southwestern teams. I grew up between Houston and New Orleans. So sometimes I rooted for the Rockets. Sometimes I rooted for the Spurs. Sometimes I rooted for the Pelicans. But when I was in middle school, I started liking the Knicks. And then I moved up here to New York. So now the Knicks are my chosen basketball team.
Love it. So I can ask you this. Are we, as Knicks fans, are we going to get it done tonight?
I'm certainly hoping so. It seems like we're going to have another 30-point game from Jalen Brunson in order to do so. I was in the house at MSG for Game 1. I have some real fears about Malik Beasley getting hot at any given point in time. And so I don't want to jinx it. We may have to put Malik Beasley back in the freezer to keep him cold for a little longer, or at least for another game. But I'm hoping we come out with a Knicks victory.
Tell me this. I spent my childhood going into Midtown Manhattan to Madison Square Garden to watch the Knicks. Is there that New York springtime buzz around the Knicks? Can you feel it in the city?
Oh, yes, certainly.
Good.
They're hosting like watch parties in and around Madison Square Garden. So after a home victory, there's, as always, people kind of sprinting in the streets to get to MSG to get on the Side Talk review video, which I'm sure they'll put out at the end of the series. But there's also people watching. And so I'm from Louisiana, so I've been in the house for Tiger Stadium versus Alabama, the New Orleans Saints in the conference championship game against the Rams, and those were pretty crazy. The fact that a Game 1 MSG game even stands up close to that is pretty impressive.
I love it. Well, Sam, now that I know that you're a Knicks fan, we could do this for an hour and a half, but we will not because let's talk a little NFL draft. And, of course, I'm going to start with the low-hanging fruit and the story that everybody's talked about. And, we're out here in Pac-12, formerly Pac-12 country, Big 12 country, so we watched Shedeur Sanders play against the Utes on multiple occasions and, watched a lot of his college games. And I don't know where you had him analyzed. Certainly, there's always a big gap between media analyzing prospects and then talent evaluators that work for teams. And obviously, that gap was bigger than most people thought, and he slides to the 5th round. What do you make of this story?
So, just on paper, you can make an argument that he was a day 1, day 2 quarterback. I thought that was pretty clear. If you look at our Sumer scores, we have one for accuracy, which on a frame-by-frame, millisecond-by-millisecond basis figures out how accurate players are as compared to every other play that we have in our database. He was by far the most accurate passer at all 3 levels in this draft class. So he did have a superpower. Typically when you have a superpower, it tends to translate to a higher draft profile. And then you look at what the consensus big boards say, which have over 110 media evaluators and people that are close to teams. If you are to read Arif Hassan's consensus big board, for example, and they had him as the 21st best prospect. Typically, we see that the floor for those type of players is pick 68. That was Malik Willis back in the day, and Malik Willis was having, there was a lot of weird COVID stuff going on that year. And a lot of kind of extenuating factors given he was coming from Liberty, a G5 school. So with all that in mind, I thought he was pretty certified to be a day 1 or early day 2 guy. And so it brings up into my head that there was extenuating circumstances. It seems as if there were some interview things that came up. There seems like there were some fears potentially about, his dad wanting to jump into the NFL and whether that could cause like a LeBron and Bronny James situation where people thought LeBron may want to go to another team in order to play with his son. I think these are very interesting one-of-one chances to occur things, and we probably won't see another drop like Shedeur Sanders in recent years.
Tell me if you believe, I've talked to a few guests about this over the past couple of days, do you believe that he was done a little bit of a disservice by his dad? I mean, Deion talked a lot about things, such as we might pull an Eli Manning situation, and I'll certainly be involved and dictate where he plays. Now, he backed off of some of those comments, but throughout the course of the process, I mean, you hear things like, oh, well, his dad sandbag interviews, so it's okay if Shedeur did. Well, no, like Deion was generational. He still might be the best cornerback that ever played pro football. Do you think throughout this process, Shedeur was done a bit of a disservice by his father?
I don't know if I can parse that out. I think it may have come down more to the fact that we have 8 to 9 teams still evaluating quarterbacks on their rookie contracts. Again, that's kind of a one-of-one thing as of late, that so basically a third of the league is evaluating rookie quarterbacks as we speak, and thus not really in the market for a quarterback on day one or day two. When you really break it down, the Browns were in the market for a quarterback, the Steelers were in the market for the quarterback, and the Giants were in the market for a quarterback as well. And the Browns and Steelers decide to go different directions. Obviously, the Browns end up coming back in the 5th round and picking him. So I think it was more of the environmental scan, and the really only disservice his dad could have done to him is putting him in a position not to win, given that they were contenders for the Big 12 title this year. I can't, with any degree of confidence, say that Coach Prime did anything to hurt his son.
Removing Shedeur from the equation, give me another player that slid quite a bit that surprised you.
So I got to keep it at the quarterback position. I'm surprised that Jalen Milroe made it as far as he did. Again, the NFL invited him to go to the draft in Green Bay. That indicated to me that there were some league sources, and in that case, direct league sources, that thought he was going to go in the 1st round. That didn't end up happening. He ends up in a perfect situation, as far as I'm concerned, with the Seahawks behind Sam Darnold in a very similar state, probably as J.J. McCarthy was rehabbing injury. In this case, Jalen Milroe probably gets to continue playing. I thought teams were going to take a shot on him as early as the late 1st round or early 2nd round, given that he had some of the highest highs in the draft. And then just some other fallers, I think more due to the structural aspects of the draft. Jalen Walker, I was kind of surprised that he made it all the way to the Falcons. I thought he could be a potential top 10 pick, but sometimes the draft just plays out as it does. Teams don't necessarily bite on certain premium positions, or if you're a flex player like Jalen Walker is, they maybe project you to a different position, the off-ball linebacking position in their defensive scheme. Thus, the Falcons get to snap him up.
What about the biggest reach, the player that was off the board that you went, wow, that seems way too high for that guy?
So I think when you really analyze it very closely, I don't want to call it a reach because I know y'all are out there in Raider territory, but I personally, if I were asked to recommend what I would do in the 1st round, I would not recommend taking Ashton Jeanty at pick 6. We saw how it turned out in New York. There was one kind of playoff year that seemed like a fluke where Saquon Barkley was able to play well in a Giants uniform, and then it ends up that he is a MVP candidate in someone else's uniform. I think that's typically going to be how we continue to see running backs end up in this league, and frankly, that's how it's ended up for pretty much everyone that has drafted a 1st-round running back. It's going to be very interesting to see how the Falcons, the last team to take a running back in that position, approach it after this year, especially if they don't make the playoffs with Bijan Robinson. But I just think it puts you in a very stressful situation in which Ashton Jeanty has to be this year one of the top 5 running backs in the league. And there's a lot of good running backs in this league right now. That's asking a lot of a 21-year-old, 22-year-old player.
Away from just individual prospects and more team-related questions, give me some winners, some teams that came away with a good draft over the course of the 3 days.
So you got to look at the Los Angeles Rams and what they did. They got a first-round pick next year for the 26th pick in the draft. That's really, we've never really seen that before. Even right before it, the Giants, who I think had a pretty good draft as well, traded into the 25th pick for a lesser price. And now the Rams have 2 first-round picks in which they could potentially replace Matthew Stafford next year. They were not even close to that scenario this year. And a kind of underlying caveat to this is we think of the Rams with Sean McVay and Les Snead and Matthew Stafford and Puka Nacua and all these good players as a team that is just a certified playoff candidate every year. Their over-under win total this year is 9.5. So that indicates to me that they looked at themselves, realized that, you know, the market doesn't think we're that great of a team. Obviously, we are going to try to overachieve that as much as possible for all intents and purposes. They were 1 play away from the conference championship. But you got to understand, you got an aging quarterback. You had a lot of injuries last year. You have a very youthful defense that hopefully grows another year. But the idea that they are able to get a first-round pick for as late of a pick that they had is quite frankly impressive. And then another item, they just came in with a plan, and they almost always execute it. Here's a weird little silver lining that I've been finding about how they like to draft. Most of their defensive linemen are guys who transferred up from lower levels, the FCS, the G5, into a power conference and immediately contributed. I'm talking about Braden Fisk, Jared Verse, Kobe Turner, Byron Young. That's 4 guys. They added another one of those guys, Josiah Stewart, out of Michigan. Previously was at Coastal Carolina, blew the doors off of our Sumer scores. They add him in the middle of the draft. I think between those 2 moves, sticking to their plan, continuing to have a process, that is why I like the Rams draft.
On the other side, a team that left you scratching your head after the draft process.
I don't know if I'd say scratching my head as much as it was just kind of all over the place. And the way I'd describe the Cleveland Browns draft is like when you go to the Walgreens or you go to the convenience store and you really just want a single bag of chips and then or a single Snickers bar and you bring that up and they're like, hey, you could get 2 for 1. And you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm eating 2 bags of chips now. And then you feel kind of bad afterwards, but at least you got 2 bags of chips for the price of 1. That happened twice to the Browns, I think. I think they were in a position to select Travis Hunter, and the Jaguars just made an offer, as they say in The Godfather, that they just simply couldn't refuse. They, very similarly to the breakdown that I gave of the Rams, were able to get a total another first-round pick next year for their selection, alongside moving just a few picks afterward. I think if they evaluated the situation just on its face, Travis Hunter, a 2-way player, very shiny. But at the same time, no player has really done a 2-way thing at the professional level. And then you look at all of those snaps he took at Colorado, maybe a potential for an injury. He's taken more snaps than probably any player in recent draft history. So I think you take those 2 analytics, you trade back, it probably has the same expected value with Mason Graham, who also blew the doors off of our Sumer scores, has a little bit more predictable position at the interior defensive tackle, but it doesn't have the same taste. They had a potential to get the certified number 1 consensus big board player, and because the offer was too good, they end up moving back. Same thing at the quarterback position. They go get their guy, quite a bit of a reach if you're just looking at expected draft position on Dylan Gabriel. Then all of a sudden, Shedeur Sanders is still on the board. It becomes too good of a value to pass up, to have those 2 guys who I assume they thought were 2 of the better quarterbacks in this draft on their team, but it leaves a weird taste given they passed him up so many times. I think that kind of makes you scratch your head. It seems like 2 things where the value, the analytics say it was the right thing to do, but, you know, it feels a little weird when you end up executing it.
Every time Travis Hunter is asked about it, he's very front-facing about his belief that he should be allowed to play on both sides of the ball. Jacksonville hasn't been as adamant as far as what their plans are. How do you think this plays out?
I think they're going to use him on offense first. Liam Cohen is an offensive player. I don't know if that's exactly what I would do because I think that a single offensive snap is maybe a little bit more valuable than a defensive snap. So you can put him in on key downs, third downs, first down packages and still get a lot of value and swap him in and out. Whereas at the cornerback position, he could cut off the entirety of the field on any given pass play. But from my understanding of what they said in the press conference, he's going to be an offensive player first and be a package guy on defense. Don't know if that's the way I would approach it, but it makes sense in terms of positional value, and I think that's the way it's going to end up going. I wouldn't be shocked if in 3 or 4 years he's just a wide receiver, frankly.
Jackson Dart grew up about 15 miles north of where we're talking today, but played his high school football about 15 miles south at Corner Canyon, and they've had quite a run developing quarterbacks. Of course, he ends up QB2, and the Giants trade back in to take Jackson Dart. How do you think this is going to work?
It's an interesting, play out. I think that the Jalen Hurts comp, or at least the Jalen Hurts play style, makes sense. He does like to go after his first read and then scramble, very similar to Jalen Hurts. He was very accurate at the short and intermediate levels this year, even though the deep passes were not super accurate, which is what I think separated him from guys like Cameron Ward or like Shedeur Sanders, for example. But he kind of takes a lot of sacks, so it's going to be interesting to see how they bring him along. I think the pick and the value in which they got the 25th pick was fine. And I think the way that they approached the rest of the draft made a lot of sense. I think the Giants end up coming out process-wise as one of the bigger winners of this draft season, given they got their guy at quarterback. It was quite a bit of a reach in terms of the consensus big board, in terms of how people projected this player to be long-term, in terms of the expected draft position, where people thought Jackson Dart was going to go and where you would have to get in order to select him. It really wasn't a reach at all. Altogether, I think I'm not going to criticize a quarterback selection, particularly when it's a guy who has such a good relationship with the head coach and the offensive coordinator. So altogether, I think it's all right. I think it's going to be good for Giants fans. And I think, frankly, for the Giants altogether, the fact that you have Wilson, Jameis Winston, and Jackson Dart all under the roof, you probably are in at least safe hands to do better than last year per se and actually get the ball to Malik Neighbors quite a few times this year.
I will take an opportunity selfishly as a lifelong suffering fan of the New York Football Jets to ask you how you think my squad did.
Look, I liked it. Pretty down Broadway, which is what they needed. They got a tackle at the right position early on. That's what they needed. I thought that they were going to want to run the ball. Darren Muji, their general manager, comes from the Broncos, built on a strong offensive line. Aaron Glenn from the Lions, also built on a strong offensive line. Then they just made good picks at good positions as we moved on. Tight end Mason Taylor, good value at the selection, was a very productive guy at LSU. Azariah Thomas, the cornerback from Florida State, the Jets kind of benefited from a swing down. Florida State had a nightmarish year, given that those two guys I mentioned earlier, Jared Verse and Braden Fisk, ended up being two of the better defensive linemen in the NFL, much less college football. This year they take a downturn. I think that was a good selection. Altogether, I like what the Jets did. Pretty down Broadway. I'm not going to call it safe because the draft is never safe, but it seems as if they made good selections at good prices at positions that matter.
Couple of minutes left. Sam, before I set you loose, I'll take advantage of the space to ask you about teams that are highly supported here locally. John Lynch used his first 5 picks on defensive players. What do you think of what the 49ers came away with?
I think the 49ers have their own separate approach to these things. Typically, they will just go ahead and reach and get their guys, which is fine. It's worked out for them okay. Just analytically, maybe not the best process, and you put yourself kind of behind the 8 ball on having to hit on these players. Here's a player I want to highlight, Upton Stout out of Western Kentucky. He was quite a bit of a reach, but then I went and looked at his Sumer scores, and he was excellent. Blue chip at limiting separation from wide receivers, at covering these guys both in man and zone and press covered. I think the reason why he was not a highly touted prospect was because, number one, he's out of Western Kentucky. Number two, he is pretty diminutive in size. I'm talking 5'7", 5'8". I think he is my favorite prospect from their draft.
Denver Broncos, 7 picks, and the only Ute selected was Caleb Lohner, who really made a name for himself as a high-quality basketball player around here. But we have a lot of Broncos fans here in Salt Lake City. How do you think Denver did?
So I think they did a pretty good job. You know, you look at what they want to do all the time, and it is attack, attack, attack on defense with Vance Joseph, and then build up an established, balanced offensive passing game for Sean Payton. Jahdae Barron, really loved the selection. I think this was a guy they probably had high on their board. Did they maybe want to go with another position? Perhaps, but he just fell, and they snagged him up. That's going to be a nasty defense with Riley Moss, Hufanga, the safety, Pat Surtain, the defensive player of the year, and now Jahdae Barron slotting in at the slot corner. I'm going to be really interested to see how he mixes in. Another guy, Pat Bryant, the wide receiver, round 3. They really had a need at wide receiver. I wouldn't be surprised if this guy was another guy they were a little higher on than most teams. He popped up really well in our Sumer scores in terms of getting open and after the catch. I really like that selection. And then you mentioned Caleb Lohner as well, 7th-round pick. I think it's going to be interesting to see how he can slot in at the tight end position, given that Sean Payton over the years with the Saints was able to find value late in the draft at the tight end position.
Last one, I know you touched on the disagreement you had with the Raiders, when it comes to a perceived reach, but they had 11 overall picks, and by proximity, that's the closest team to us here in Salt Lake. Macro 30,000-foot view, how do you think the Raiders did?
So, again, Mike, it's tough. Was Ashton Jeanty one of the most NFL-ready looking players? Yes. So, as a result, good pick for them. Everyone thought that he was going to go around there. It's just tough from an analytical perspective to draft a running back. Guy I want to highlight, Jack Besh, out of Louisiana. He's an excellent wide receiver. He really showed out at the Senior Bowl. I'm going to be interested in how they use him in particular. But just kind of down the line, a lot of needs addressed. As you said, 11 picks made. A guy I want to highlight, round 6, pick 4, J.J. Pegues. I'm really interested to see how Chip Kelly utilizes him, because here's a guy who was really recruited as a tight end, ends up becoming an impact performer at defensive tackle. I wouldn't be surprised if he plays a little both ways ball.
Sam, where can people go find your work, bud?
Yeah, go check out our new documentary on YouTube. It's called From Undrafted to Unforgettable. It's about Jonathan Casillas, a linebacker, NFL multi-time Super Bowl winner. I went into New Jersey, his hometown, interviewed him, and if you're a football fan, you're going to love his story coming out of New Brunswick, New Jersey, overcoming injury at Wisconsin, becoming a core special teams player, and then becoming a starter for the Saints, the Patriots, and the Giants. Go check that out. YouTube, SUMER, SumerSports.com.
Thank you, my friend. Have a good week, and we'll do it again soon.
Thank y'all so much. Bye-bye.
All right, Sam Bruckhouse. Before we catch a break, Ryan from the Dish Pros stops by. Pick up the phone and dial 801-424-DISH, and you'll find the ability to save a lot of money on a lot of different things. What's going on, Ryan?
I'm telling you, if you're a cable customer and you saw that last rate increase, you saw your bill go up, guys, like 10, 20%. It just depends on your area. Listen, stop overpaying. Pick up the phone. We'll lower your bill massively, truly saving you not just a few $100 over a year, but a few $1,000. Get you the biggest, fastest DVR out there. It'll auto-hop commercials, auto-record your games for you. Plus, you'll have access to all the streaming apps built into the system. Simple and easy. Call us today. Get upgraded. Ask about our great internet options we have, too. Half a dozen internet providers, $35 to $50 a month. Listen, stop overpaying. Lower your bill. Upgrade your service. Just call us, and we'll set you up with dinner at JCW's. Free movie channels and dinner, and also free installation. Call us 424-DISH, 801-424-DISH.
All right, there he is, Ryan from the Dish Pros. 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. Final hour of the program on a Tuesday afternoon comes your way next. On ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, we are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, let's get a Drive at 5 time Tuesday afternoon, 7 minutes past the hour, 5 o'clock. It's been a very, very lovely day outside. It's been nice and warm and sunny and clear here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. We're looking at about 68 degrees and sunny. A little rain coming up tomorrow, but the weekend looks pretty nice. As it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic, Porter Larson behind the glass. We're going to bring in Kyle Bonagura coming up in just a little bit. For the latest on the world of college football, we'll do the NFL draft. Ask Kyle if Diego Luna, RSL's young superstar, has a chance to crack the U.S. men's national team squad this summer and maybe be in consideration for the World Cup. So stay tuned for that. We've got a busy, busy night in both the world of pro basketball and pro hockey. It's already halftime, believe it or not, in Indianapolis, the first round of the Eastern Conference playoffs, where the Milwaukee Bucks have a 47-41 lead over the Indiana Pacers. That game is on NBA TV. NBA TV has a doubleheader tonight following the conclusion of Indianapolis taking on Milwaukee. It's going to be Orlando and Boston. Live at the TD Garden in Boston, Massachusetts, the Celtics have a 3-1 lead over the Orlando Magic. We are about 22 minutes and change away from tip-off, the world's most famous arena and the mecca of basketball in Madison Square Garden, downtown New York City, where the Knicks will try to eliminate the Detroit Pistons. And then a big one tonight, 8 o'clock Mountain Time at Ball Arena in Denver, Colorado, sees the Denver Nuggets take on the Los Angeles Clippers in a series that is tied at 2 games apiece. The Stanley Cup playoffs have been a lot of fun. Two teams that really don't like each other are about to drop the puck at Scotiabank Arena in Toronto, Ontario, where the Senators and the Maple Leafs will do battle. Toronto leads that series 3-1. Tonight's also the Devils and the Hurricanes. The Hurricanes will look to eliminate the New Jersey Devils. Good series between the Wild and the Golden Knights. It's deadlocked at 2 apiece. Then the later game is going to be in Los Angeles, where the Oilers and the Kings will drop the puck at 8 o'clock at Crypto.com Arena in Los Angeles. That series is tied at 2 games apiece. 5 o'clock hour of the program tonight is brought to you by our friends at the Fulmer Legacy Center. So coming up on Friday, very excited for this. We will be out and about, and we would love to see you, love to shake your hand and meet you at the Fulmer Legacy Center. It's a legacy fulfilled. It's been 40 years in the making. It's going to be realized coming up on Friday of this week. The location is 10960 South Park Road in South Jordan. That's 10960 South Park Road. It's a brand new legacy center with our good friends at the Fulmer Legacy Center. It's a 16,500 square foot community sports and wellness complex inspired by Utah's legendary boxing brothers, Gene, Jay, and of course Don Fulmer as well. Located in the South Jordan Sports Complex, minutes from the site of the current Fulmer Brothers boxing gym. It is brand new. So it's going to start at 11 o'clock. They're going to have a ribbon cutting. It's going to go till 3 o'clock, but we'll be on site until 6, so you can come by and take a tour of the new facility. Appearances by local leaders, dignitaries, and sports personalities. So, again, the ribbon cutting is going to be at 11 o'clock, and the Fulmer Legacy Center will serve as a hub for amateur boxing, youth mentorship, and community health programming, including fitness, boxing for women, seniors, and individuals living with Parkinson's. The Fulmer brothers, of course, legends known around the world for their success in professional boxing, as well as their humble grit, spent decades mentoring at-risk kids following their retirement from professional boxing. So the address, once again, is 10960 South Park Road in South Jordan. So come on by, the Fulmer Legacy Center. We'll get rolling at 11 o'clock that day. All right, so throughout the course of the show today, been talking about this interesting dynamic, the juxtaposition between talent evaluators, and I'm using air quotes there, in the media space compared to talent evaluators in the team building space working professional teams. Now, for the Utah Jazz, the next interesting date will be May the 12th. May the 12th is the night we'll find out where the Jazz are going to draft. And then after May the 12th, we'll have a better idea of how the draft will color the context of how the Jazz will approach this offseason. And it's interesting topically this week because, of course, the NFL draft was last week over the weekend, and the big story continues to be out of the NFL. The precipitous fall of Deion Sanders' son, Shedeur Sanders, who played, of course, college football and junior football for his dad. You know, Shedeur has never played for another coach outside of his father, and he fell all the way to the 5th round, seemingly confusing a lot of talent evaluators in the media space, including our guest last hour, Sam Bruckhaus, from Sumer Sports. I mean, most every media member thought Shedeur would be a first-day pick, maybe an early second-day pick, and he falls to the 3rd day and the 5th round. And it's always been fascinating to me to try to do this show through the prism of my experience evaluating talent for professional teams and being in front offices and now being on this space on the media side and covering these things in both the NFL and the NBA draft, and how oftentimes there's such a gap between the two, and how oftentimes there are a lot of misses, certainly, in both the NFL and the NBA. I mean, we talked about this with Smitty this week. It's been interesting over the years to analyze the Jazz draft process and how, dating all the way back to the 80s, most of the best players that have ever played for the Jazz have been found in the late lottery, in the mid-first round or the late second round. John Stockton, Karl Malone, Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, Gordon Hayward, late lottery pick, and I could keep going. I mean, the fact of the matter is a lot of the earlier picks the Jazz have made have not been great. Some have worked, some have not. Enes Kanter was brought in here with a ton of promise, a ton of hype, and never fully put in the work to learn how to guard on the professional basketball level. So despite all of his offensive skill, he just did not necessarily have the NBA career most people were expecting. So we'll see where the Jazz draft, and we'll see how they analyze the entire process. They have a 14% chance of drafting number one overall. And your reward, unfortunately, the incentive structure of pro basketball does reward losing. And the reward the Jazz will receive for being the worst team in the NBA this year is they will have a top 5 pick. So hopefully it's number one. If not, it's going to be top 5. The conversation surrounding the NBA draft this year seems to be there's only a consensus with 1 and only a consensus with 2, with Cooper Flagg being, of course, the prize at 1, and then potentially Dylan Harper being the pick at 2. And a lot of draft evaluators, bringing this back around to this interesting topic, certainly believe that Cooper Flagg is generational, and a lot of them believe that Dylan Harper has a chance to be that as well. So obviously, only time will tell as far as how this is going to play out. A couple of pieces of local news. Matt Gay is signing with the Commanders on a 1-year deal worth $4.25 million, and all of that is guaranteed, which never happens. It is the most fully guaranteed money for a kicker in a 1-year deal in NFL history. Of course, Matt was released earlier this year, and the Commanders decided to bring him in for a hefty paycheck. So happy for Matt for sure. This news broke yesterday as we were signing off air. Don McHenry has transferred to the University of Utah to play for Alex Jensen and Alex's staff. He averaged 17 points, 3 boards, 2 assists last year at Western Kentucky. And so the project for Alex Jensen and his staff to continue to build Utah basketball continues. Right now, the roster looks like this. Terrence Brown from FDU, Alvin Jackson III from Salt Lake Community College, the aforementioned Don McHenry from Western Kentucky, Elijah Moore from Syracuse. Keanu Dawes is the only returning player from a year ago that will be on the roster. Ja'Kai Howard is an Auburn transfer. James Okonkwo is an Akron transfer. Then they've got E.B. Traore, and then I believe it's Seydou Traore, who is an Iowa transfer. Kendall Sanders has signed to play from IMG Academy. So I believe there are 5 roster spots left for Alex Jensen and his staff to continue to kind of fill out this roster, round it out, and hopefully compete at a high level first year in the Big 12. All right, coming up on the other side, we'll talk college football. We'll talk about Utah. All right, final segment of the show today. Fun Tuesday show with a lot going on. It's a busy night in both the world of pro hockey and pro basketball with a lot of Stanley Cup action and NBA playoffs as well. So enjoy that tonight. I will be on TV with Dave Fox, who has 2 Pelotons and 2 Emmys. Wasn't on the show today, which, whatever. I thought that was kind of the deal. We'll see if we can get him on this week. But 10:35 KMYU. We called 5 questions with Spence. What was that prima donna's excuse for not coming over to do the show today?
Yeah, apparently he's got a meeting.
Yeah, right. Give me a break.
A station meeting that I'm sure that they need Dave Fox at for the decision making, the planning, the producing. I'm sure he's got a bunch to do.
I'm quite sure that they did not need Dave at the meeting at all, but I will be on TV with Dave tonight. All right, we have a new partner on the show. Outlaw Distilling is their name. Excited to partner with them. It's Outlaw Distillery. It's a homegrown, grain-to-glass, nitty-gritty whiskey, vodka, rum, and moonshine distillery right here in Salt Lake County. So definitely check out a tour. You can do a tour, which takes about an hour and a half. Tour. It's a tour and a tasting booked at outlawdistillery.com. If you tell them I sent you, they're going to hook you up with a shot glass as a souvenir. How about that? So Outlaw Distillery, they opened in 2015, only as the 4th distillery in the great state of Utah. Deeply rooted in Utah history and tradition, even the name Outlaw is inspired by legendary characters such as Butch Cassidy and the Outlaw Trail, which served as a primary transportation route for many of the notorious Wild West outlaws. The vision for Outlaw Distillery is clear. Help show the world that some of the best spirits come from the least expected places, i.e. the state of Utah. So go book a tour and a tasting with our friends at Outlaw Distilling. More information can be found at outlawdistillery.com today, so definitely check it out. All right, Porter, you're somewhat of a nature expert, right? I mean, that's kind of in your wheelhouse. You like hiking, you like birds, you like things that are concerned with nature.
Yeah.
And animals and such.
Yes, and such.
Why am I continuing to see a debate about 100 men versus 1 gorilla in a fight?
I don't know.
What am I missing here?
I don't know where that's coming from, but I have seen the same thing.
Do you have a hot take? Do you know who would win in this? It seems like 100 men should be able to handle 1 gorilla.
100 is a lot and seems kind of unfair. And you're right. You should be able to, like a full grown silverback gorilla, whether a mountain or a lowland gorilla. Let's be clear, there are two different species.
All right.
Both of them are like at least 10, 15 times stronger than an average man. They got big old canine teeth, but 100 men. I think you have to. First off, which 100 men? Is it 100 men that are like Sean O'Connell's black belts, or is it 100 men that are going to be at the whatever that thing is at the Maverick Center in a few weeks?
Oh, the Alpha Chodes, or is it a different thing?
If it's 100 of those guys, the gorillas have no issue.
Yeah.
But if it's 100 Sean O'Connells, I'm taking OC. Okay. So it's a hard debate, I guess.
According to Tara Stansky, who's the president and CEO and chief scientific officer for the Dion Fossey Gorilla Fund, because of course, she says a gorilla would come to the fight boasting more physical strength, much stronger jaw muscles, and thick skin that is tough to penetrate. Male gorillas, known as silverbacks, can weigh more than 400 pounds and says they are estimated to be about 4 to 10 times as strong as humans. She goes on to say it's an issue of sheer numbers, and not all of the 100 men would walk away alive, but ultimately they should be able to handle it.
There you go. That's exactly what I would expect. But yeah, depends on the men. There are a collection of 100 men that I bet that gorilla could beat.
All right. Weird online debates. You people need to get a hobby. All right, fun night tonight in the NBA and in the NHL, so enjoy some playoff action. Porter, what comes our way on a Wednesday edition of the show?
On a Wednesday edition of The Drive, Spence will continue the NBA playoff action discussion. Tony Jones stops by the program. Chris Kamrani stops by. Actually, on a Wednesday this week, we'll have CK in studio for an entire hour. Trevor Sikkema to continue the NFL draft coverage and reaction. And then, oh, yeah, it's Dave Fox.
Yeah, all right.
on a Wednesday.
Well, we'll see about that because he ditched us today. But I will be on TV. You know what? Maybe I won't go do my TV here with Dave tonight. If he's
Just don't show up.
Yeah, if he's going to do it to us, maybe I'll do it to them.
Text him right before the show and let him know you're not going to be there.
I should. But just in case, tune in to KMYU at 10:35 to check it out. It's called 5 Questions with Spence. And with that, we will say goodnight. Special thank you today to Kyle Boniger, to Tim McMahon, Kaylin Jones, and Sam Bruckhouse for any of the sound you may have missed from the show today. You can log on to the website, which is ESPN700sports.com. Make sure to download our mobile app and take us on the go. The ESPN 700 app is available in the App Store and the Google Play Store. And then finally, for what we do in our space every afternoon for 4 hours, we have a podcast page. And if you appreciate and like what we do, we ask that you support our podcast page by going to your preferred podcast catcher, hitting subscribe, rate, review, all the things they ask you to do. If you say nice things, give us all the stars. It really helps the show. For Porter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Enjoy your Tuesday evening. Talk to you on a Wednesday drive. As always, you can catch that right here on ESPN 700.